Hello everyone, and welcome to this conference that's been organised by EUSTAFOR and CEPF and is also a partner event of the European Green Week 2020. My name is Jo O'Hara and I am the moderator for today, coming to you from Scotland. I am the former Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Government Forestry Regulator, Policy and Support Agency. I'm a professional forester and I now have a portfolio career. So that's a bit about me. Just also to say that in the background we have a great team from EUSTAFOR and CEPF who are supporting us technically on this. And so just a shout out to Ellen Koch, Diem Tran and Susanna Callow. Okay, so what we are hoping to achieve today is an insight into sustainable forest management practices in environmental conservation and how these practices can support the EU in meeting its long-term biodiversity, climate and green recovery objectives. We'll also explore different approaches to maintain and enhance our forest biodiversity. The way that the event will be structured is that we will have some welcome speeches from our hosts. I will then give a brief presentation and then we will move into a panel conversation, at which point the audience will also be able to ask questions. Then we might need a breather and a coffee break, so we'll have a quick 15-minute break and then we will reconvene with a second panel session and then we will close the conference to be finished by 5:30. Just a reminder that if you are on social media and using Twitter, the hashtag that we have is hashtag Forest for Biodiversity and hashtag EU Forest, which you can also see written down in the event agenda. Another couple of final technical points. If you're an attendee, do not worry that you can't turn on your camera and your microphone. This is normal. When you want to pass on any questions and that sort of thing, then you can do that through the Q&A function, and we'll explain a bit about that later. Okay, so let's get going with this. This is the second time that I've done one of these conferences, so I'm hoping that this is all coming through okay for you. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm very pleased to welcome our two special co-hosts of this conference today, who I see have got their cameras turned on. So very warm welcome to Jessica Polfjärd and Adam Jarubas, two MEPs who are here as hosts of this conference today. We're going to be hearing some more from you, Jessica, later on, I think, at the closing of the conference. But at the start, Adam is now going to speak to us, and he is going to be followed by a brief welcome from Reinhard Neft, who is the CEO of the Bavarian State Forest Enterprise and President of EUSTAFOR. So, Adam, welcome, and over to you for your welcome address.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the conference, European Forests, Hotspots of Biodiversity, which I am co-hosting with my EPP colleague, Mrs. Jessica Polfjärd. As members of the European Parliament, we work jointly on questions related to European forest and nature in the Parliament's Committee on the Environment. I would like to thank Mr. Reinhard Neft, President of the European State Forest Association, and Mr. Sven-Erik Hammar, Board Member of the Confederation of Private Forest Owners, for taking the initiative to organize this timely debate about the contributions sustainably managed forest can and should make to the objectives of the European Green Deal. The relevancy of this topic is acknowledged through the presence of many highly qualified speakers and panelists, as well as by the very long list of participants. Indeed, we are a gathering of almost 400 people today, and for good reason. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, European policymakers ever more concerned about the state of nature in Europe and the increasingly adverse impact of climate change made the EU Green Deal a top priority of their policy agenda. For obvious reason, forest and forest management occupy a prominent place in the debates resulting from this plan. In fact, more than 30% of Europe is covered by forests, providing a wealth of environmental, economic, and social benefits for all Europeans. Forest management practices in Europe fulfill diverse policy goals and social expectations. In forests close to cities, forest managers must pay attention to the need for recreation areas, whereas in forests with very high biodiversity and rare species, conservation aspects are especially important. Other forests are valued for their high productivity or their protective role in controlling water fluxes, soil and wind erosion, microclimates and infrastructure. Thousands of bird, mammal, insect and plant species find their homes in Europe's forests and other wooded lands, which covered approximately 182 million hectares or 41% of the EU 28 total land area. We cannot deny that most of these forests have a long history of being managed by humankind. The fact that so many managed forests have a high biodiversity value, leading to the subsequent decision to include many of them in the Natura 2000 network, is proof that sustainable forest management preserves forest biodiversity. Half of the total Natura 2000 terrestrial area has been designated in forests, while 21% of European forest resources are part of the Natura 2000 network. These numbers are impressive indeed. We need healthy and resilient forest ecosystems to reach the goals of the European Green Deal. Adequate financing is needed to make sustainable forest management economically sound and to ensure that environmental and socio-cultural benefits continue to be provided to the society at large. The future European legal framework must take into account the opinion of those who will ultimately be responsible for its implementation. Forest and forest management clearly have a great potential to reach the EU's objective of building a future-fit Europe. But whereas there can be much agreement about the positive intent of the biodiversity goals to be reached, it's equally necessary to keep in mind the practicality of their implementation. Previous experience has shown that when deciding on a policy, those who will be expected to implement the new laws must be included in the decisional process. Field managers, administrators, forest owners, scientists, and all relevant stakeholders must be consulted at every stage of the decision-making process in order to avoid unintended negative impacts or even total failure. Just like every other type of ecosystem, forests are dynamic systems, but the life cycle of a forest is very long. It is measured in decades, and the forest management tools which aim to improve forest health and resilience must therefore be planned for the long term. Currently, even the most conservative models indicate that a significant and alarming impact on forests from climate change can be expected over the next decades. While forest management is at present under great stress to ensure that European forests will be able to more quickly adapt to rapidly changing climatic conditions, the EU is looking to forests with increased interest in their capacity to mitigate both climate change and declining biodiversity. It must be understood that healthy and resilient forests are a precondition for such mitigation. As previously mentioned, Europe's forests play a major role in protecting the EU's biodiversity and in meeting the objectives of the EU's nature legislation. In addition, sustainable forest management provides multiple forest goods and ecosystem services to society at large. The provision of all these services must be predicated on a solid economic basis, since the forestry sector is subject to open market rules, just like any other market operator. Moreover, multifunctional European forests are a source of sustainable and renewable raw materials for entire value chain, which provides employment and well-being to millions of European citizens. This role of forest is boosting the European bio-based and fossil-free circular economy cannot be overestimated. It is because of the exceptionally broad environmental, economic and social benefits that forests provide that a participatory bottom-up approach, including all relevant actors, will not only lead to a cohesive and viable policy, but will reinforce the commitment of those who will need to implement the policy decisions in order to make the EU Green Deal a reality on the ground. For this reason, I'm glad to see such a broad representation of experts of the panels of today's conference. With their knowledge and expertise, we believe we can actively contribute to a comprehensive understanding of how Europe's forest can help to accomplish the multiple ambitions of the European Green Deal. I'm convinced that the result of today's discussion will contribute to setting an appropriate EU forest-related policy framework, which will better integrate European forest and the forest-based sector into the Green Deal. In this context, I'm proud to announce that the European Parliament is continuing its work on a robust forest strategy post-2020, which can fulfill this role within the EU and is expected to adopt its position on the European forest strategy during October plenary session. I wish all of us an interesting and fruitful debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jarubas, for that enthusiastic introduction and really wide-ranging. That's exactly what the day will be about. So thank you, and thank you for hosting it today. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Reinhard Neft, the Chief Executive of the Bavarian State Forest and President of EUSTAFOR. Reinhard, over to you. You probably need to switch your video on.
Yeah, thank you, Joe O'Hara, moderating this conference. Dear Mrs. Polfjärd, dear Mr. Jarubas, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of the European State Forest Association, EUSTAFOR, to this important conference on forests and biodiversity, one of the most prominent and relevant topics on today's policy agenda related to forests. My name is Reinhard Neft, and I'm the president of EUSTAFOR. For the past 15 years, I have also been the managing director of the Bavarian State Forest Enterprise. Although we all expected to meet under different circumstances earlier in March, these unusual times require extraordinary measures. Even though we cannot meet in person, I am sure that this conference, organized under the auspices of two members of the European Parliament, bringing together excellent speakers and a very rich and diverse audience, will be an important step towards building a common understanding on how sustainable managed European forests can assist in seeking solutions for biodiversity concerns. EUSTAFOR represents 36 European state forest management organizations from 25 countries, which are often the largest forest managers in the member states. Our common aim is to manage forests of a view to meet societal needs in an environmentally sound way, while at the same time ensuring economic sustainability by producing the wonderful natural resource timber. Forests provide a home of thousands of bird, mammal, insect, and plant species. About 50% of the Natura 2000 sites, the equivalent of 37.5 million hectares, are forests, of which 8 million hectares are situated in state forests management by EUSTAFOR members. An additional 16 million hectares of state forests provide benefits resulting from their protected or protective status. Management practices applied in state forestry are based on detailed inventory systems and thorough long-term management planning processes. Our work experience clearly shows that ecological functions of the forest ecosystems and biodiversity can be maintained in managed forests along with many other functions. In fact, forest management is not only compatible with the conservation of biodiversity, but in the most cases actively contributes to its maintenance and enhancement. However, European forests are currently experiencing a growing number of new developments and challenges. Significant impacts on forest management, such as the change of the societal attitudes toward forests in Europe, as well as the increasingly serious impact of damaging factors such as storms, droughts, pest outbreaks, and diseases that we have observed over the past few years. Currently, the European forests are victims of the climate change, but they can also offer solutions. EUSTAFOR has therefore refocused its strategy and set out 4 strategic areas for the years to come. These are: first, multi-purpose forestry as a provider of ecosystem services and social benefits. Second, climate change and its impact on forest ecosystems and state forest organizations. Third, biodiversity, including the management of protected areas in the state-owned forests. And fourth, state forest management in the context of an innovative bio-based circular economy. 2 of these topics are directly related to our discussion today, whereas the other 2 are relevant for reaching the overall objectives of the European Green Deal. In parallel, we have also developed several new strategic actions in order to jointly reach our objectives. Among these is to review solutions for strengthening the resilience of forest ecosystems, including the composition of the tree species, the organic fit, genetic fit, multi-layer stands, forest cover, and so on, correlated to the climate change. This conference, co-organized with the Confederation of the Private Forest Owners, CEPF, will provide you with good examples of the road we would like to take. I believe more events will be organized in the future, also with our other forest-based sector partners. To conclude, EUSTAFOR and its members are aware of their major role as providers of ecosystem services and are keen to continue contributing to the promotion of biodiversity in forests. Therefore, we are emphasizing the fact that ensuring the sustainable and multi-purpose management of forests is necessary to balance and fulfill European environmental, societal, and economic needs. Ensuring the continuity of the sustainable management of the resource we hold in our hands is the only solution for forests to adapt to changing climate conditions. Sustainable and active forest management can thus ensure effective and long-term carbon sink, serving climate change mitigation, while not neglecting all of the many other functions provided by our forests. Therefore, we need from the EU one holistic approach, consideration of the subsidiarity, because the European forests are very diverse, and an involvement of the practical experience and know-how of the foresters and the forest owners. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming discussion with all of you.
Thank you very much, Reinhard. Good to hear from you. And what a fabulous organisation EUSTAFOR is. I used to work with the forest agencies in the UK, who I know are very enthusiastic members. And some of them are online today. So thank you very much to those two introductory speakers. We're now going to move on to a brief presentation from me. To just share with you some of my learning over the last 30 years in forestry. And I'm just going to do a little bit of technical trying to share my screen, so just bear with me for a minute while we get this set up. Okay, so what I'm going to speak about builds on what Reinhard just said, which is taking that link from the deeply practical, the muddy boots, all the way up to the sorry, I just need to change something on my screen. From muddy boots to ivory towers is what I've chosen for my presentation. The climate and biodiversity crises are the greatest long-term threats to our well-being. The way that people, communities and businesses interact with trees is fundamental to a healthy and flourishing world. This is a time of vital conversations about how people live together and how we sustain our planet. So I'm excited about the European Forestry Strategy process. For too long, it has felt like forestry in Europe is simply what is left in the space between agricultural, environmental and trade interests. So this is long overdue. So as an introduction, a little bit about myself. My career in forestry and land use has taken me from the muddy boots of the forestry floor to the ivory towers of Parliament and policy. And it has been a fantastic journey. I've gone from managing contractors out in the woods to managing forests, managing organisations and supporting ministers. All of these are important if we are going to get the most from our forests and to protect them for the future. A little bit about Scotland. In the last few years, Scotland has been one of the most successful countries in Europe at restoring and creating habitats, particularly woodland. We've gone from less than 5% cover to 19% forest cover in the last 100 years. And over the last 20 years, this has included establishing tens of thousands of hectares of new native woodland. Our forest product sector is growing fast and is now worth over £1 billion to the economy. And we have some of the most modern and up-to-date timber processing facilities in Europe, contributing vital materials to the bioeconomy and the circular economy. Our multifunctional forests are supporting rural communities, threatened wildlife, and crucially, global climate. We've learned a lot on the journey so far, and we can clearly see the global ecological, climate and socio-economic crises are all playing out in our forests, but also that our forests have a vital role to play in them all, as the previous speakers have described. So first of all, a bit about practical forestry. My definition of forestry, which is taken from various dictionaries and what have you, is the science and craft of managing trees and woodland for a purpose. Please remember that word purpose. It will run through our whole day. Forestry is not good forestry if it doesn't have an agreed purpose. And practical forestry matters because at the end of the day, talking, writing strategies, holding webinars, drafting legislation won't achieve anything if we don't get down to the muddy, messy business of engaging with our forests, whether that is to protect them, to nurture them, to harvest them, or to understand them. And these 3 points on the slide are some of the issues practical forestry has had to handle. Firstly, the imperfect science. As we are learning with COVID, good science is so vital, but it cannot give us all the answers. And this is where the craft comes in. Good foresters have to weave together the sometimes conflicting sciences, the different stakeholder values, and the pure practicalities of interacting with organisms and landscapes to support flourishing societies and ecosystems. Next, practical action needs to take place in the context of space and time. You need to act locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, and consider timescales measured in working weeks, seasons, tree lifetimes, and beyonds. And finally, we also have to take into account the different values associated with the forest. Ultimately, it is these values which will determine the purpose, and these values are changing. All of this impacts on how we should manage our forests. Good forestry for a clear purpose. No one value or purpose has primacy at the international scale, and all are changing. As you can see in the picture, foresters are often caught in this conflict between being told we must have more trees, must have more trees, must have more trees, and then local communities saying, yeah, but not here. These are the sort of things that we have to balance. And yet, in spite of changing values and purposes, many European forests continue to be hotspots of biodiversity, sources of valuable materials, and places of peace and enjoyment for people. How do we ensure that practical forestry adapts to address the issues that we currently face? I think we will learn a lot from our fantastic panelists later, and for now, I'd like to share a bit of what I've learned. Just a picture of what we're talking about. This is one of my favourite pictures of part of the Highlands of Scotland. Clear purpose is good forestry and can lead to amazing biodiversity as well as other benefits. I want you to look at this picture and think about the links that I talked about earlier between policies and research from the ivory tower to practicalities on the ground. This forest you can see is in the Highlands of Scotland. It is a mix of native and non-native woodland. It is a network of areas managed for biodiversity, areas managed for tourism, and areas managed for timber. And it is owned by a mixture of public and private owners. There are also homes and roads scattered through the area. Here is another example from an English national park. Again, a mixture of non-native forests managed for timber, biodiverse ancient oak woods along the lake, tourism, settlements and farmers in a mix of public and private ownership, with the trees and forests integrated into the functioning of the whole landscape. So what have we learned from this and how do we do it well? You've already heard this. Forests are big, their impacts are far-reaching, and they are valued for different things by different people. In the second image that I showed earlier, the value of the landscape to the mountain biker is totally different to the value to the timber buyer, the hotel owner in the valley, the farmer with the oak trees, and the nation's nature lovers. When doing things with the trees, we always need to be aware of the multiple values that different people will take from the forest. Secondly, none of us knows what is actually going to happen in the future, especially in the lifespan of a forest. So whatever we do with these forests, we must build in resilience in the face of the many possible threats that they face. Thirdly, and following on from the first two, because we do not know what the future value of the forest will be, we also need to include room for adaptation to future opportunities. When I was designing forest plans in the 1990s, there was no consideration of carbon, let alone that there may even be new markets for providing revenue from that carbon. And finally, the forests need to be understood. The science and the monitoring needs to come in, be that the basic knowledge by society of the value that is tied up in the trees, or detailed understanding by governments, specialists and foresters of the attributes and the functioning of forests. So one of the things that we've done is to join things together. And this is something that I do think that Scotland has got right. And this is joining up across government so that forestry doesn't exist in its own separate silo. The commitment to address the climate and biodiversity crises across government provided a niche for forestry. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, these are the climate change plans, the energy strategy, and the legislation for climate change that were introduced in Scotland in 2017. There was a very clear join up here amongst policies for agriculture, energy and forestry and transport, and that provided a niche for the forest strategy to slot in, just as the European Green Deal provides a niche for the European forestry strategy. With a clear forestry strategy that was agreed unanimously by our Parliament, it provided foresters with a framework to start designing forests to take into account all of the multiple benefits that we want from our forests. These scales need to work together. The strategy supports and brings together plans from regional and local levels. This isn't perfect, but it does allow for multiple values, resilience, and adaptability to all be addressed at the appropriate scale. It also incorporates appropriate monitoring and reporting to cement in understanding and knowledge. But in case you think that I'm painting an over-rosy picture about forestry in Scotland, we do get things wrong, and there is some serious learning to be had there too. This picture encapsulates why I became a forester. Scotland's peatlands are an incredible habitat, recognised internationally for their significance well before we understood their deep value in the climate struggle. However, their economic productivity has always been very low, and in the past, forestry was seen as a way to improve that. Huge areas had various silver-cultural technology thrown at them and public money to establish productive, non-native forests, as you can see at the side of the picture. This took place with little engagement with stakeholders and was fueled by hands-off government regulation and tax breaks in the 70s and 80s. Since then, some of the trees have grown very well and started to produce timber. Some have died from disease and poor establishment techniques, and some were blown over. But also the peat started to dry out, the wildlife started to disappear, and people protested. And so where we are today is that the government recognised the problems with this previous policy in the 90s. They've since then spent tens of millions of pounds fueling partnership programmes with the public forestry agencies, private owners and non-governmental organisations, notably the RSPB, putting things right. And you'll see from the slide, these are huge areas where the trees have been removed, the drains have been blocked, and the peat is regrowing and stopping emitting carbon and starting to suck up huge volumes of carbon. So these cleared peatlands are now central to Scotland's biodiversity and climate ambition, alongside our forests. That is also good forestry, knowing when you got it wrong. So what did we learn? We learn we need to adapt to improve. The past is not always a good guide. The top picture on the right-hand side shows that in the past, the primary value associated with these peatlands was a subsistence fuel. Rural development after the war placed a higher value on productive land use, and forestry responded, but things change. The past was not always a good guide. The value associated with biodiversity and then carbon outstripped any productive value of growing trees. Context and scale has also played a big part. As you can see on the right-hand side, the scale of the planting was huge. There probably was scope for some small-scale productive and native forestry in this area, quite a bit of it probably, without impacting negatively on the habitats or the carbon. Just not plastering it over the whole landscape. You've got to get the scale right. Thirdly, rigid adherence to old values just isn't resilient. Purposes might need to change, particularly over the lifetime of a forest. And then finally, we do not have enough time to find the perfect answer. The ecological challenge and the climate challenge is with us now, so we need to act, but we need to learn while we were acting. This final picture at the bottom of the right-hand corner shows the type of transformation that was achieved by some innovative and pretty risky forestry harvesting and site restoration. This area worked, other areas it didn't, but we're learning as we go. We have to, because we don't have enough time. And the final point I would want to make in all of this, the final piece of learning, is looking beyond the ivory tower, looking beyond our own countries and looking beyond Europe. What we do with our forests affects biodiversity and the climate globally, beyond our own ivory towers. If we don't produce sustainable wood from our incredible land, we are exporting the problem, encouraging less sustainable materials or less sustainable biodiversity elsewhere. And so to my penultimate slide. Please, please remember, in spite of all of these pictures of trees and habitats and wildlife, at the end of the day, whether we are protecting, restoring, nurturing, harvesting, removing or regenerating forests, it all comes down to people. People wearing muddy boots out amongst the trees, people studying satellite images or having valuable debates in their ivory towers, and people across many countries in their living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, offices, on Zoom, engaging with the issues from different disciplines and cultures, and each bringing their own sets of values. Forests are about people. So in conclusion, 5 points I'd like you to take away with yourselves from today. The definition of good forestry changes through time because it depends on the purpose, which is driven by value. And the value of biodiversity and carbon is changing very rapidly at the moment. Secondly, for European forests to support flourishing global biodiversity in the long term, we must connect the scales from the the micro right the way up to the global. Thirdly, foresters have a deep practical understanding of the interactions between people and trees, but need to recognise and adapt to new values and new knowledge. Fourthly, for policymakers, researchers and NGOs, you're all vital in facilitating the conversations about value that we have to have, but please, please remember to work with foresters to get that vital link to action. And then finally, always question single purpose plans, because values change a lot in the lifespan of a tree. Thank you very much. Those are my contact details. You'll find me on LinkedIn if anybody wants to carry on the conversation after the conference. Right, so I will introduce to the audience who we have on the screen. I'm not sure we're all in order. We're all seeing each other in the same order, but everybody has their names up, so hopefully the audience will be able to tell who is who. Maybe you can wave as I introduce you. Okay, so first of all, Anne-Marie Bastrup-Berg, if you can give us a wave, Anne-Marie, hello. Who's an expert in forest assessments and information from the European Environment Agency. Next, we have Christine Farcy. Hello, Christine. International forestry policy expert from the Service Public de Wallonie and an invited lecturer at UC Louvain. Next, we have Floor Vodda. Hello, Floor. Researcher at the Estonian University of Life Sciences. And then Antonio Suarez, who has lots of hats, member of the Board of Directors of the Confederation of Farmers of Portugal, member of the Board of CEPF, and chairman for the European Commission Civil Dialogue Group on Forestry and Cork. And finally, Uwe Mestermacher. Hi, Uwe. Head of Nature Conservation Department at the Lower Saxony State Forest. Okay, hi panel. We're going to get going with the conversation with you all in a minute, but before we do that, I'm just going to let everybody know about the poll that is about to open, which all attendees can contribute in, and we would encourage you to do that. So what we would like you to answer is to select 3 from the list of what, in your opinion, have been the 3 most environmentally significant changes in Europe's forests in the last 30 years. Please try and limit yourselves to 3 or fewer. And we'll come back to the answers to that after we've heard from all of our panelists. Great, so how are we going to start this session, which is all about where do we stand with current forests in relation to biodiversity. And each of our panelists is going to do a quick 5-minute presentation to each of you from their own area of specialism. And we're going to start with Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie, if you are ready, if you would like to share your screen, and you've got 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to hear also to be part of it, and I appreciate a lot the introduction and also your Joes of the amazing Scottish landscape and the many key messages we can take home to discuss in context also of the EU Forest Strategy. I was told to very shortly to tell about where we stand, and I will not try to repeat too much. I must say that the presentation before me had been quite comprehensive. But what I want to precise is also that, and it was also told, that when we are talking about forest biodiversity, we are looking at all the forms of life and all the ecological processes. So it's really the holistic view on the forest. It's about the composition, the structure, and the functions. And the thing is, regarding the composition, in fact, we are making some monitoring and follow-up of how the forest is doing, but in fact, we don't know so much.
We seem to have lost Anne-Marie. Christine, sorry about this. This is suddenly jumping to you. Are you able to start?
Good afternoon, everyone. I have no PowerPoint, but I only have 5 minutes, so I will try to, I can follow? Yes?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, I will focus only on one idea I would like to share with you for contributing to this the discussion on this very important topic. For that, I will ask you to go outside and to hear what is happening in the society. Let's hear first to the special Eurobarometer for 81 edited in May 2019 that indicates that Europeans place very high value on nature and biodiversity, and that they are concerned over its loss, with awareness increasing since 4 years. Parallelly, climate and environmental concerns are inducing a jump of forest very high in the political agenda, as shown, for example, by the pledge for planting trees, which are achieving impressive levels worldwide. At the same time, the many turbulences that humanity is going through is creating uncertainty and a feeling of urgency, and is exacerbating tensions and misunderstanding in the public debate around forests. And this is what we are trying to address in our research on the social representation of forest, which is a broader concept and perception by the society. And in that concept, we are referring to the framework of psychosociology and the concept of individual or social emotion. What is an emotion? An emotion is an uncontrolled reaction by an individual or a social body to its perception of an external event. Emotion can be positive or negative, intense or light, depending on the level of adequacy with all that constitute its identity, its personality, its value, its foundation, its knowledge. Forest is the cradle of humanity. This is where we are coming from. And for that reason, is symbolically highly powerful. I would like to mention a study in the 90s by Robert Harrison, an American scientist studying the symbolic value of forest in Western societies. And he was describing the first villages and the later city as a clearing into the forest. He then made the analogy with the smell of baked bread that projects us into our childhood. For him today, increasing and accelerating urbanization no longer allows the society to perceive the limits of this clearing. And the thesis he suggested is that emotion around the issue of deforestation or by the loss of biodiversity is less linked to the loss of some plants or animals, but rather to the deep and visceral fear of the loss of the access to our collective memory. Today, climate and environmental concerns certainly exacerbate those fears, as expressed, for example, by the huge reaction to the recent forest fires in Amazonia, Australia. And besides the symbolic dimension surely presented here by the way of this example, we are also studying another dimension that should be addressed with its relationship with emotion, and it is the ethical one, which is framing what is considered good or bad by somebody. And currently we have various models coexisting in the society in relation with forest biodiversity. As for example, is it good or bad that humans use the forest? Is it good or bad to respect the functioning of forest ecosystems? Is it good or bad to respect every kind of life? Both dimensions I shortly presented here are today addressing the irrational while substantive part of what makes us react and make decisions. So in our view, besides scientific and economic ones, the ethical and symbolic dimension should be given place they deserve in the international dialogue on forest. Moreover, and I will finalize with this, if we want to build the basis for an innovative dialogue with the society, able to tackle the challenges we have ahead, instead of using emotions to get people to join a project or an idea, a practice which is often used in strategic communication, we should, at the contrary, progress in understanding and then properly addressing the drivers and levels of social emotions related to forest and forestry issue. Thank you very much.
That's tremendous. Thank you very much, Christine. Fascinating. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're now going to move quickly on to Floor. You're up next. So if you could switch on your camera and share your slides if you have any.
I wanted to thank the organizers first and foremost for giving me this platform, and yeah, I once more say that my name is Floor Vodde. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I have been finishing my master's and bachelor's degree at the Wageningen University, and then I moved on to Estonia and finished my PhD at the Estonian University of Life Sciences. And as such, I'm also an active member of two Nordic-Baltic networks. Those are research networks. One of them is Forestry, which focuses on natural disturbance dynamics analysis for forest ecosystem management. And it exists already since 2002. And not less exciting is the PROFOR, a joint North European research network on Nordic-Baltic Nordic-Baltic forest and forestry. So some of the prevailing forest disturbance types in Europe are fire and windstorm, and I just briefly illustrated them here by some maps from the European Environment Agency. So at the left-hand areas, according to fire risk, the highest are the areas, of course, in the south of Europe, up to 1990, and some projections for the future. And at the right hand, the graph depicts the wind storm scenarios according to different models, how extreme wind speeds may change, increasing in those areas, in the yellow areas where it's already relatively high. So one of the topics that we are working on in our team now in Estonia is the spread of the spruce bark beetle, Ips typographus, after storm. So this upper picture, it is taken with a drone in April this year. It's of Karula National Park, and it shows the 2016 storm area at your right low side. And it took down areas of variable size. And since then, the spruce bark beetle has affected several stands outside the storm areas. So here, storm damage seems to be the direct cause of insect outbreaks. But we suspect that exceptional dry and warm summers of 2018 and 2019, which had a negative effect on the spruce figure and fertility, may have been the main driver behind the insect outbreak. However, we are still in process. We still need to figure out whether species composition has an impact as well on the outbreak. And since this is a national park, we are not allowed to clean the area, which makes some forest owners around the national park a little bit nervous. And in the end, we also want to compare our results with studies in, for example, Finland and Sweden, but also in Austria and Czech Republic, because variability in climate and in management approach and in historical management may also explain eventual differences. We also have contributed to the development of several studies to place the climate sensitivity of natural disturbances and the overall readiness of secondary forests for climate change in a bigger perspective. So the latter one has just appeared actually a few days ago. With the current state of species composition, landscape variability and climate change scenarios in mind, we can imagine that there are several options for forests in Europe to develop. in the coming century and even beyond. We call those the frames of change. As an example, we took a mixed stand in the southern boreal zone. And with minor climate change and inherently changes in disturbance regimes, the tree composition in the area is more or less sustained, perhaps with some minor shifts in relative abundance. That's the first frame, the persistence frame. And then you move up to moderate change, frame 2, and major turnover of species composition, where the entire biome may change in frame 3. So when changes are too drastic for tree species to migrate, forest may be lost and we change from a forest to a non-forest biome, frame 4. And in the last frame, by using exotic tree species suited to the new climate, novel ecosystems may be established. Although you may put question marks whether the biodiversity levels may be that high in those novel ecosystems. Well, with this seed planted now, I'm going to give you back to the moderator of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Flora. We didn't give you very much time, but that's really interesting, and that those 5 frames really shows the scale that we're dealing with. So thanks very much for that. We'll come back to you when we get into the panel. So next we're going to go to Antonio.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much to both CMPs for this great initiative. So I'll try to do my best to be on the 5 minutes presentation to give both everyone a little bit of the forest owners' point of view. It is the goal of the major part of forest owners to respect and achieve the 3 pillars of sustainability. So we are talking about the social pillar, economical, and environmental pillar. And with that, and with the good examples, we get good stories to tell. And we have many of those in European forests. We can highlight some examples where European forests are in fact hotspots of biodiversity, not only by the fact, and this is already being said here today by the first MEP, that 50% of Natura 2000 sites are in forests, which is of course an award to the good job that forest owners and managers have done in the past decades to achieve and also to maintain forests of high biodiversity value. Also, we know that the forest bird index and deadwoods are having positive trends, where these 2 European indicators are stable for common forest bird index and are increasing for deadwood, giving us an important contribute to show positive stories. And as you can see by the photo of this first slide, and being myself a forest owner and a manager in Portugal, I couldn't be more proud to highlight the great work of forest owners, managers, and landowners in the highly successful project of reintroduction of the Iberian lynx and maintaining habitats for endangered eagles species in the south of Portugal. This is one of the best examples I can find how the multifunctional role of forest and the respect and productivity for nature conservation provide these worldwide examples of a perfect hotspots of biodiversity in European forests. So this is one of the great examples that we can have. But we have, of course, serious challenges to tackle, and this is not new for us forest owners. It happened in the past, and it's happening nowadays on a very strong way. And I can confirm, unfortunately, that Portugal was one of the first countries to suffer from climate change effects, and now we can see it being felt in all European forests. I have some stories of being in Brussels a couple of years ago, where I was always discussing the drought problems, the extreme fire problems, and the pests and diseases that were tackling Portugal. And it was still new for many of the other countries, but now this is a European-wide problem on forests. So we are dealing now with consecutive extreme summer droughts, with extreme wildfires, storms, floods, and the huge impact of invasive alien species with the spread of pests and diseases. So this pushes us to adaptation and to innovation to find solution and mitigation process in order to maintain those 3 pillars of sustainability that I was speaking on the first slide. And that brings us to the importance of sustainable forest management. This is something that us as forest owners and managers are always fighting and building, that is the sustainable forest management, where the use of forest lands, it's managed in a way and in a rate that maintains biodiversity, the productivity, the regeneration and vitality to achieve and maintain those social, economical and environmental role of forests. Because we really trust and we have the strong conviction that we need to see forests under these 3 pillars. We cannot take one of them and decrease the importance of the others. So we cannot have a social and environmental role in the forest if there is not an economical way of that, and the same thing about social and environmental for the economy. So we have nowadays, and we can be proud to say that we have many important and proactive and innovative examples, like this one that I'm showing here in the slide of MTK's biodiversity program of the Finnish forest owners. And in the other hand, we also have bad examples as the lack of management, where the set aside of forests that can be due to desertification or economical reasons, like we have unfortunately in the center and north of Portugal, provide the perfect scenario, for instance, for extreme wildfires. And the moment that we are speaking now, we have many cases of extreme wildfires going in Portugal at exactly this exact moment. So this is something that we also need to be very active by understanding that we need to take a look of European forests, not just in a general way, but each case is a case. And there are many cases where definitely set aside is a huge problem, and we have the strong and unfortunate experience of that. So for us as forest owners, motivation and adaptation together with sustainable forest management are the key for a successful future in European forests. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Antonio, and thanks for keeping to time. So we are a little bit behind. I'm pleased to say that we have got Anne-Marie back, but we'll be hearing from her in the panel discussion. So Uwe, we're on to you now.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for invitation. I would like to give an example for a state forest concepts regarding the question, where do we stand? And the undertitle could be strictly protection is only one option. And so what are the other approaches I'm talking about? That would be a long-term ecological forest development as sustaining in 13 principles. And we use for the complete area, and the name is LÖWE, but it stands for long-term ecological forest development, and it's an integrated concept and forms the ecological basis for all our silvicultural decisions and practice. And it starts from avoiding clear cuts, going to special principles for conservation. I will look on it later on, yeah. But important thing is those are principles taking conservation issues on the whole area, and then on protected areas, of course, we have a lot due to legal obligation and additionally in self-responsibility. There's a focus on conservation. For example, we have 10% unmanaged forests under strictly protection, and around 25% our forests are under specialized management for conservation issues. Additionally, in the last year, we started restoration projects in specific areas. They take around 1% of our area, where we focus on restoring the functions of ecosystems. And those together are the base of our concept. It's a preservation of old trees, protection of rare species is one of those 13 principles. And of course, what does it mean? It means that we take care for old forests. That means older than 160 years for the forest structure we find in Lower Saxony or Germany. 6% of our forest area is strictly protected for those old trees. But habitat trees and deadwood we found on the whole area of our managed forest. And of course, we preserve them taking 3% of our area, more or less, with special tree-related microhabitats. We found them single or in group, although preferable in groups. And deadwood over the whole area, important for a lot of species, of course, related to forests. And it's around 30 cubic meter per hectare. We know it today, but those numbers come from the situation before bark beetle in the last 2 years. So that might be even more. Yeah. Additionally, as I already said, we have a network of special conservation areas with natural forest under strictly protection as one possibility, but additionally, we have cultural historical management forests, wood pasture, which is forbidden normally in the forest in Germany and other countries as well, but important for certain species and structures. Shade intolerant managed forest, e.g. Oak forests, because in our close to nature or nature-oriented forest management, the species who needs light structures, they're not really in favor. So we have a special protection for those forest types. And another important thing we have is the forest edge, because we found, or in our opinion, where we have ecological gradients in the forest or in the landscape, those areas are hotspots of biodiversity, and forest edge is one of them, with a high potential, especially for insects. And so this is another example of this principles to look for them. Yeah, and as I said, restoring functional relationships of landscapes is another approach where we do not try to restore a certain habitat, but to look what is the potential of a landscape and see forest as part of, for example, here, the water system related to forest. And we have a floodplain down in the valley, but a connection to ponds, which we drained maybe in the past, up on the hill. And if we get on to restore those functions, we have a robust and good system with a high potential for biodiversity. This is not only a conservation program, it's also a business case for us because there are no obligations today to do so. And yeah, we do it in or for compensating measures, and it is a part we want to strengthen because it's an alternative way, alternative business case for a forest enterprise. Yeah, so I believe the combination of approaches in an integrated concept maybe have a higher potential to preserve biodiversity for forests than strictly protection alone. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Uwe. That's great. And thanks to all the panelists, and apologies to Anne-Marie that we'll miss her presentation, but we'll get straight on to her when we do the panel discussion. So before we get into the panel discussion, I just want to let all the audience know that the question and answer function is now open. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, please submit them through the Q&A button, which is on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I see we have Antonio and Uwe with their cameras on, and Uwe's out in the woods, which is great. And Anne-Marie is back, welcome back. And Christine and Fleur, we're just waiting for you to turn your camera on. Great, we're all here. Okay, hello everyone. So what we're going to do, because we've overrun a little bit on the time, is first of all we're going to announce the poll results and let everybody have a look at those. So everybody is seeing on their screens what the poll results are to the question, which is what have been the most 3 environmentally significant changes in Europe's forest in the past 30 years. And in terms of environmental significance, there is a clear winner by some way. 117 out of 148 votes was damage by natural disasters, pests, diseases, fire. That's a very clear winner and real consistency there amongst the audience for which is the most significant. We then have quite a wide spread coming in at around 30% in terms of the change to species composition, change to the use of non-timber forest products, changes in soil and water condition, changes in timber harvesting, and loss of fauna and flora populations. So I think this is the purpose of these polls, was so that we could get a feel a bit for who is out there in the audience and how consistent and how spread out our views. And I think what this shows us is we do have quite a diversity of views out there amongst the audience. So the one bit that I'm interested to see is that good that we've got an informed audience who don't think we've got a decreasing area of forest, largely because I know amongst the general public there is a general consideration that forest area is decreasing when in fact in many areas it's increasing. Okay, so they're the poll results. Panelists, you can see those and you can weave those into your answers. And so we're going to get straight into the panel discussion, and anybody who wants to ask a question of the panel, please, like I say, put your questions into the Q&A and we'll get those together. So, Anne-Marie, I'm going to come to you first because we missed you earlier. So I see you've got your microphone on, which is great. So, as an expert in monitoring forest biodiversity, what do you think would happen to the biological diversity of European forests if we continued for the next 30 years without changing current policies?
Thank you for trying to let me talk. Unfortunately, I'm not an oracle, but I will try my best because I think I don't think you can get an answer to that question, but I think it's a good entry point for debate. And I also want to say that policies are not the only factors having an impact on forest biodiversity, of course. And forest biodiversity in Europe is mainly the result of the national and the national biodiverse forests and nature policies, and also the European forest and forest-related policies. To come with a general state, now you will see my presentation later on when I was presenting some facts was supposed to be behind my answer here, but you will see them later. What we can say is that, in fact, the policies, both at national states, at all levels, at EU state, is doing a lot. And if you look at a lot for the forest biodiversity, an example is, of course, the Habitats Directive, the network of the Natura 2000, which is 44% of protected areas in Europe. This is quite a lot. There's a follow-up of the threatened, rare, and specific species, and looking at the threatened habitats and species and so on. I don't want to repeat it all. We're also short in time. So the thing is that it doesn't seem that it helps so much because we still hear about threats, and we have measures about extensions of bad conservation status and so on. If we continue, now we have the Green Deal, which has a lot of focus on the biodiversity and the forest, which is a big change compared to former times. If we look how we stand now, what is happening is that we have a lot of harvesting, and this is what we can expect because the forest has been planted some years ago with the purpose of wood production, and the forest is mature, the demand is increasing, and I would predict that this development will continue. as long as the demand is there and there is no other payment mechanism. And that has an impact on forest biodiversity. No doubt about it. At the same time, what we see and what will continue is an increased awareness on the threats. We have heard about it, on the threats on the forest from climate, from natural disturbances, from society, and also an awareness of the need to keep the forest healthy and productive and resilient, and to protect the biodiversity. In the coverage, I think there will not be a lot of changes, because we also have, most countries have the policy of maintaining forest area where we have. Hopefully, there will be internal changes in forest composition and structure to adapt and be more resilient. Some will have an improvement consequences for the forest biodiversity, some not. Trade-offs are unavailable. I think when talking about the harvesting, there's also many ways of harvesting. In infinite range, in fact, you're taking more care of the ecosystem and its biodiversity. We can mention closer to nature, retention, coppicing, and so on. So the conclusion is that for me, the forest and what we will see will reflect the need of a society, and also the range of biodiversity that society wants, and how willing consumers are, in fact, willing to pay the prices to incorporate incentives for the protection of biodiversity and ecosystem. So what forest do we want as a society? And of course, there is this unknown. Sorry,
Marie, thank you. I'm sorry, but we're really running out of time.
I was just to say that I wanted to add the unknown, because what I was talking about is what we know, but there's a lot unknown that we have to consider too.
Yeah.
The unknown is the disturbances and climate change and so on. Yes.
Okay, so in summary, the knowns are the increase in the harvesting, the changing in the values from society and how that gets incorporated. But there are lots of unknowns in here as well, and we can't be oracles, and every forester will be with you with all of that. So thank you very much. Okay, thanks. I'm now going to move to Christine. Thanks. Now, Christine, we spoke, that was when you were talking about emotions and how we bring emotions into all of this, which I thought was, really interesting take on things. And given that biodiversity conservation, along with climate change, is one of the highest expectations from civil society today. So how do you think, taking those two, climate change and biodiversity, how is that reflected in the public perception of forests? How is public perception now, and how is it changing?
Well, on that, indeed, the Eurobarometer is showing that both biodiversity and climate change issue are the more important benefit from forest. What I would like to say, I'm not sure I will clearly respond to your question. What we are observing is that the society, public society, is with a very big wish to protect the forest, and to not being cutting trees. This is going to that direction. For example, we had a survey in Belgium, and we were asking to a representative one what activity could be forbidden in the forest, and for 2/3 of young people it is cutting trees. So this is a very sensitive issue that we should address, because it is also showing some misunderstanding. For example, clear cutting is often associated with deforestation. So we can share many examples on that, but the issue is really to set aside the forest is some kind of reaction to the fear of people against looking to the threat of the forest with biodiversity loss and climate change. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And does that not cutting down trees extend beyond European trees as well? Yeah. Okay, so maybe some conflicts there between wanting to use less environmentally damaging materials, reducing reliance on oil and gas and that sort of thing, and yet not cutting trees down. So definitely a real contrast in views there. Okay, thanks. Flor, going to come on to you now, and speaking about forest disturbance, and your presentation, you know, that was really really powerful stuff about the beetles, but also the beetles on the back of a severe wind event. And then we're also hearing from Antonio about the fires as well. So we're getting all these drastic events, and in the poll, clearly everybody's out there saying the biggest impact is actually these naturally occurring things, very, very significant. So yes, people are concerned about human intervention, but also these natural disturbances. So could you say a little bit more about how this is changing, these natural disturbances, and these disturbances are changing European forests, and what, at a gross scale, the impacts on biodiversity are?
Yes, sure. Indeed, maybe it's good to make a difference first between distinct disturbance events like windstorms and fire and insect outbreaks. Those are the pulse disturbances, and then there is climate-related stress. Those are like increased periods of drought, higher fluctuations in the amount of precipitation. Those are press disturbances, and those two parts are actually highly interacting. So that's important to keep in mind. And talking a bit more about those pulse disturbances, in Europe there are actually areas with high disturbance activity and areas with moderate or low disturbance activity. And well, we have done a small study about boreal and temperate zones, which showed that actually those in number, they are quite equally distributed among those zones. And actually, I think that it's also valid for the Mediterranean area. So the classification of disturbance activity is based on proportion of forest area affected and the size and the complexity of the disturbed patches. And later on, we could also relate that to the prevailing disturbance types. So high activity was related to fire mostly, and low activity was related to winter storms mostly. And in fire areas also defoliators were more active. So if you take those climate or disturbance activity areas, the climate sensitivity of disturbances and those areas, they are quite strong. So in zones with high disturbance activity, impact is highest if years with higher than average temperatures coincide with the years that are drier than average. And in zones with low activity, disturbance activity, sensitivity to variation in precipitation is higher. And it is hard, in general, it's hard to detect any changes in disturbance regimes because the variability is already big.
Yeah.
And if you have those disturbance regimes, it's hard to distinguish whether it goes up or down, but it's true that it's contributing in itself to the diversity of the ecosystem. So,
okay. Thank you.
Oh,
sorry, are you still? Sorry, I wasn't sure. Had you finished your answer?
No, not yet.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
I was actually planning to say that well, the IPCC reports, the projections were they are predicting that higher temperatures and extremer drought periods, they are actually already partly coming true, like also Antonio was telling. So we really have something here already. So as a result, we have seen that degraded or at least less diverse ecosystems, they have fewer answers options to answer to that. So if you have the uniform spruce forests in southern Germany and Austria and maybe also southern Sweden, once those stands are weakened, in extreme conditions, they are more vulnerable to further disturbance. So if, like, for example, the spruce bark beetle is coming, and they are affecting bigger areas. So if we expect even more of those events, then it depends a lot on the status of the forests and the forest landscape present in the area.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry to cut you off, but we are up against it for time. So this theme that I think is for my whole career that I've been hearing about diversity, increasing resilience, and that link between the two, we're actually seeing that playing out. And so I think that continues to play. I think there's a question about what scale that diversity happens at that we're grappling with. So interesting stuff. Thank you. So Antonio, I'm going to come on to you now, and I'm sorry we are really pushed for time. So and we're getting loads of questions in. Thank you from the audience. So there are lots of questions coming in. So we'll just get through these conversations and then we'll get onto the audience. So Antonio, as a forest owner, how do you practically encompass biodiversity into your daily management decisions, and what helps you to make those decisions?
Well, if you consider the personal experience that I have since being a forest owner and a forest manager in the south of Portugal, we have one of the best examples on hotspots of biodiversity, since we are considering especially quercus, oak for cork, and the mixture of quercus with pinus. It's a multifunctional forest, totally. So even though it's highly protected by law, the quercus in Portugal, it's not a set-aside management. It's totally the opposite way. So we have a forest in the south of Portugal where we can mixture agriculture, we can mixture cattle, we can mixture recreational purpose, hunting purpose. So it's a huge world of multifunctionality that really makes this a living system, that it's a hotspot for biodiversity. I'm pretty sure it's one of the best examples in Europe, and definitely gives us an idea of what could be the sustainable forest management in these practical areas. And we have in Portugal the difference that, as I've been told, I was telling me in the presentation, that we have a huge difference between the forest and the north and the south, where in the south we have highly managed in the sustainable way forest, and we are not so affected by wildfires as in the north and the central of Portugal, where the small dimension of the property that doesn't give income to the forest owner doesn't permit them to make management, and that creates a huge problem with extreme events. And we also are very focused here, since we are suffering for climate change for quite a years. We are now focusing on adaptation and mitigation. And of course, we see that the biodiversity is suffering by climate change, not from management, but directly from climate change. So now we are focusing a lot on how to react with the forest and how to see which species of forests are more adept. And of course, this takes time. We are talking about a system of forest that takes decades to adaptation. And we are talking more and more about the services that the management of the forest provide to all the society. And that's, I think it's one of the subjects that really needs to be focused in the future. If it's on eco schemes, if it's in the CAP rural development pillar, we really consider that forests being so important in giving these ecosystem services, forest owners and managers need to be helped on this situation to provide all of these functions to the society.
Thank you. So there we sort of like building on what Flor was saying, this diversity of management as well as diversity of species at the landscape scale, providing that resilience, particularly within the climate change, the changing climate is really important. Yeah. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now, Uwe, apologize for this. I'm not going to give you your own personal question because we have got so many questions coming in from the audience. I do want to get us back on time so that we can have them. And I'm just going to go straight to the questions from the audience. Could I ask the panelists, if you want to come in first, or if you want to answer the question, just to raise your hand physically. You don't need to push any buttons, just do it physically so I can see who wants to come in on the questions that are coming from the audience. Okay, you all okay with that? Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so as these are flooding in, the first question that I have is from Sylvia, who is from EOS, the European Sawmills Industry, and it's on forest monitoring. So the question is, for the sawmill industry, it is essential to be able to forecast the impact of natural disturbances on wood availability, including the identification of tree species. How much wood will we have in the future, and what species? Do you think that this living assessment can be possible at the EU level? So the question is, how much wood will we have in the future, of what species? Do you think that this living assessment is possible at the EU level, and what tools are available to help us decide it? Who would like to answer? Anne-Marie, yeah, I thought it might be you. Okay, so if you unmute yourself.
It's an easy question, apparently, but I don't think it's easy to answer at all, because even at some country level, this might be difficult. So to get an assessment at European level with all with a high precision and is very, very challenging. To say it's impossible, I wouldn't say, but it's not done yet, and I think it might be one of the reasons is really the complexity.
Okay. What tools do you think can help here? Are there any innovations that you're aware of that could help here?
I think it's one obstacle maybe is also the data exists. Sometimes it's difficult to have it. That's one thing, but this is not the only thing. It's also the tool, the modeling. I don't know the tool. I don't have it. No, I don't want to answer that because I don't have a clear answer.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else want to come in on that one? I know there are some very, very interesting developments in remote sensing and with Copernicus and with the new satellites that are going up, and with the analysis that's able to be done. Is that there are just new tools coming out all of the time. In fact, I was going to include one in my presentation, but I didn't. A lot of them being developed in the tropics, but I think there's huge potential in Europe for them. But I'll stop speaking about that. And Uwe, you've got something to add in here.
Yeah, I could just add that in Germany there was a study carried out like this, but of course it's easier because the database is more simple than looking on the whole Europe. But we see another effect that now after the bark beetle development we have in the last year, it's not, the numbers are not they are not true anymore. So it's really different to make a forecast, in my opinion, for quite a long time. And a lot of the spruce timber we have now, it is not really harvested at all. It is decaying in the forest. So yeah, it's really hard, I guess, for now under the conditions of climate change, especially to really forecast.
Mm-hmm. So the importance of this real-time data, like you say, surveys that were done before the beetle outbreaks are relatively meaningless now, but getting that, so it's not just the resolution in space, it's also the resolution in time that's important, and does seem to be a priority. So okay, thank you. So I've got another question now, who is from Jeremy and Ivo von Trotta from CEPF, which is what do the panels think? How should we pay for adaptation for climate change, for the actions planned in the policies on adaptation? Who should pay and how should we pay? Anybody want to answer that one? Antonio, yeah.
Well, as I said before, adaptation takes time and takes investment. So I will give you the example that we are now having in Portugal. We are being suggested by the government to change from eucalyptus and pinus trees to replant with cork oak. But we need to face as forest owners, and even for the industry, that if you change from a forest species that could give you income in 12, 20 years, and you change to one that will give you the only income in the first 35 years, after the first 35 years, and with climate change and adaptation that we are struggling with huge stacks of mortality in young plantations, we need really to have some support here, because if we wish to change the European forests to a more adaptation and mitigation and giving the ecosystem service I was mentioning, this will take a huge investment, and this will take decades to get it. So we should start it immediately, but it cannot, I think that if the society, as Christine has said, society has a different vision of what happens in reality of the forest. And sometimes it's not clear from some urban society what happens in the rural areas. So we need to explain, we need to give a lot of education to society, and society must understand that if they want that the forest can be one of the major solutions for climate change and for the sequestration of carbon, all society needs to be on board of this train. It cannot only be private or state forests that need to deal only with this, because it will be impossible and the solutions will not come forward.
Yeah, thanks very much, Antonio. Does any other panelists want to come in on this? This ties up with this this question of values that I was covering in my keynote, and values aren't always monetary, and I think the conversation that we had about clear felling as well, and cutting down trees being bad. So 2/3 of young people saying cutting down trees is bad, that goes against their values. And yet on the flip side, sustaining forests, providing low carbon materials, it's a different value, and how do we balance these and get the transfer of payment? Lots of questions on that actually coming in. So I'm now going to move on to the question of the integrated approach versus the segregated approach. I suppose it's the land sharing versus land sparing approach. And a question about the balance between dividing the forest into sections with a dominant function, or multifunctional forests where everything is combined. So which do you think is the right approach, and why, or which is a better approach? Uwe, I think this is possibly one for you. Can you turn your microphone on?
Yeah, I will go.
Oh, Christine, you're going to go. Oh, sorry. It was. I thought Uwe. I was going to ask Uwe to say something, but Christine, if you want to go first, and then we'll have Uwe.
Yeah, very shortly. What I can refer to what we are using in my country. And my country is integration. It's multifunctionality, trying to combine all the different aspects in one parcel, or at least in one ownership. And for sure, segregation can exist, but it is not. We are thinking it's the best way. And you were mentioning that in your own presentation, that make only a linear choice is not maybe good for the future, looking to the long term of the project we have to manage.
Yeah, I think the thing for us that we found is it depends on what scale you're looking at. Scale is really vital here, because when you zoom up close, things might be segregated, but as soon as you zoom out, you might see a whole forest that's very integrated. So I think scale is important. Uwe, do you want to come in on something on that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess we all like the multifunctional forest and integrated conservation concepts. But multifunctional forest, I think it doesn't mean that we have the same level of protection on the whole area. So I guess we have places or areas with a really high level, maybe under strictly protection, but it is connected through our managed forest. And so we have some sort of baseline where a lot of species, not all, but a lot of species can travel and are connected between those hotspots or protected areas. So that is some sort, if you like, a combination of these two approaches. But of course, it's a multifunctional concept, and if you only have a sectoral concept, then there is no link between those protected areas. So you could put it on a high scale or share of land, but still those areas are not protected, not connected, and in a multifunctional forest, this connection is provided.
Thanks. Great point. Okay, so finally, and then we'll be closing this panel session. Everybody can go and grab a coffee after this session. So the last question is going to be about public perception. So it seems that the perception in the public of European forests is often superimposed by the perception of forests in third countries. For example, forest management in Amazonian or Asia are then transferred to European forests. What are your suggestions for how we overcome or address this? Antonio.
Well, that's almost the million-dollar question, because it's we are now facing social media networks that an image, sometimes a wrong image, educates in the wrong way millions of young generation. So I really think that we should try to change what it's teaching in school, because it's from there that things start. I have two young girls that are now in the first stages of schools, and sometimes I try to read the biology and the environmental books that they have. And I must say that sometimes they go for a very good communication, but sometimes they really pass the wrong idea. So that most of the times they pass an idea of what's happening in rural areas, agriculture and forestry, and it's not true, most of them, or they just pass by the bad examples, and they should, but they forgot in a very strong way to pass the good examples and how forests can be so important for the ecosystems and for the future of mankind. So really education and schools should be a future to address.
Thank you. Christine, you're waving frantically.
Yeah. I would like also to say that we have to take this very seriously on board. And we are, for example, in our project, we are building, and if colleagues are interested, they can contact me. We are building a media observer on forest, but not only media as media for news, but also music, literature, video games, and collecting all this material. We are analyzing how forest is represented, because we are in a media bath, and this is what is dominating and what is influencing very strongly the social representation of people, or youth in particular. So for example, we know very well at forest level the height of the tree, all the measures on trees, but we don't know what about the society and the link with the society, and in particular, this media observer following what is happening in the media at large on forest is very important, and we should, I think, focus on that to be able also to correct the way we are communicating.
That's really interesting. So that kind of bears on that earlier question about, we were talking about the data about the trees and observing what's happening in the trees, but observing what's happening in society. I think that's really, really interesting. I'm so sorry, folks. We're at 15:15 now, so we're at the end of this session. Thank you to everybody who's sending in questions. Where we can, the team will try, and the panelists will try and respond if we can, to some of the questions that have come in writing. Sorry if we haven't got round to your question, but I suppose it's always the way. You've got 200 people in the audience. We can't get round everybody's questions. So thanks everybody for participating in the poll. And also thank you very much to our panelists, and well done with the technology. I realised we were all we're all finding our way there. I think you did really well. So thanks for your efforts and for your contribution. And you can now go back to being attendees for the second half of the conference and enjoy that, and enjoy the chat and the Q&A there. Thank you very much for your input. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the afternoon session of the of the conference from CEPF and EUSTAFOR. I'm pleased to say that we didn't lose too many people over the coffee break. I think the numbers have only dropped by about 5, so we must have been getting something right in the first half. So that's really good. So this afternoon we are going to, a bit similar to this morning, but without the keynotes, we will be having a panel discussion. And then we will be hearing a member states perspective from Matthias Schwerer, and then we will have Q&A with the panel and with Mr. Schwerer as well. So that's how we're going to run things. And on our panel, we have, and again, like this morning, if you could wave when I say your name and then the audience will be clear who you are. We have Umberto Delgado Rosa, who's the Director for Natural Capital at the DG Environment at the European Commission. Hello, Umberto. We have Bo Larsen, Professor Emeritus, Department of Geosciences and Natural Resource Management at the University of Copenhagen. We have Luc Ba, who is the Director of the European Regional Office at the IUCN. And we have Frank Krum, who is a researcher in Forest Dynamics Unit at the Swiss Federal Institute for Forest, Snow and Landscape Research. Hi, Frank. Okay, so this morning's session, although we did go all over the place, was primarily about the condition of our forests as they are at the moment and how they've changed over the last 30 years. This afternoon's session, we're going to be moving towards looking to the future more, but what the opportunities are and what actions we need to take in order to address some of the challenges that we were discussing this morning. So I would like the 4 panelists who is everybody apart from Matthias, have been given 5 minutes each to do a brief presentation of their thoughts on this in terms of opportunities and action for the future. And we're going to start with Umberto. So Umberto, if you could.
Okay, so first of all, a big thank you for this opportunity to briefly discuss forests and biodiversity. I'm very keen on contributing and giving some reflections. Before I move on the slides, let me tell you the point of departure of the biodiversity strategy that we'll be discussing, and also the Green Deal, is that we do have a problem in forests in relation to biodiversity. The figures we see is that only some 22% of forest habitats are in favorable conditions, and we know of the risk of extinction of some 42. So let's keep here just for an introductory comment I was doing, which was stating that from a point of view of nature and biodiversity, European forests are not in a good shape. And I was quoting DEA data from the State of Nature report, which is data based on input from the member states. And we have been in this session, in this event, the threats are well known: the droughts and climate impacts, the pests, the invasive alien species, the increased wildfires, also pollution, but also land use changes. A recent study about the JRC published in Nature has shown this sharp increase in harvesting since 2015. So I would say what the Green Deal aimed to address is this linkage of forest with these 2 values that we see society cherishing more, biodiversity and climate change. Actually, the first lines, the first paragraph of the Green Deal, if you revisit it, is actually linked climate, biodiversity and forests. So with this said, and getting into the biodiversity strategy, if I can have the second slide. Well, let's say first point also generally, yeah, it comes. Before going into the contents, I would say the biodiversity strategy we have seen approved in May was approved amidst the pandemics, which is telling in itself from the recognition that there's something on biodiversity that goes wider than just protecting nature for the sake of it. We need it as humans, and the origin of this crisis is on the mismanagement of nature we do. And also I think we have a pretty ambitious biodiversity strategy, indeed matching the challenge for the EU to lead by example. There's more in the biodiversity strategy that relates to forests than the forest specific chapter, but I will focus a bit more on it for the sake of time management. So basically what we see there is this need to increase the quantity together with the quality, and especially I would say the resilience of your forests to all these threats. Also, to be very clear, the biodiversity strategy refers to the multifunctionality of forests. So it's the functions related to biodiversity, to climate, but all the others related to the socioeconomic aspects, namely our circular bioeconomy. The Green Deal had announced, and also is said in the biodiversity strategy, that building on the biodiversity strategy, we will come with a EU forest strategy next year, precisely to tackle all the aspects of the forest systems, including, of course, the climate neutrality and biodiversity aspects of forests. There's also a good focus on knowledge through this further development of the Forest Information System for Europe that aims together to put a one-stop shop on information on forests so that we know better what we are talking about and what's happening around. And there's this pledge to plant at least 3 billion additional trees in the EU by 2030 under ecological principles with focus on cities, on agroforestry, which is an area I personally think should be more and more linked to everything we do on forests, linking agriculture and forests. But in a way, to bring in one key word that also relates to forests is restoration. There's quite an ambitious EU nature restoration plan in the biodiversity strategy, which a part is this 3 billion additional trees, but also next year we will come with binding targets after a soil impact assessment on nature restoration. If I can have the next slide, please. In terms of forest management, there are also some provisions in the biodiversity strategy, and one that we all agree is, of course, that the share of areas, the forest areas covered by management plans should increase everywhere, first and foremost in managed public forests, but also in private forests. So to be clear, the biodiversity strategy does not bring any new paradigm in relation to sustainable forest management. That's what we want everywhere.
1 minute left, Umberto, please.
Okay, I can be quick. What it does announce is that we will be coming with some guidelines which can complement and enrich sustainable forest management, noticeably these closer to nature forestry practices and biodiversity friendly afforestation and deforestation, and also in relation to the goal to strictly protect primary and old growth forests. We will come with guidance and definitions of what that refers to. Can I get the next and probably last slide, please? Just to highlight, if you allow me, passing my time very slightly, I would just say some key opportunities that I do identify. One is we need foresters and forest owners. Their knowledge, experience, engagement, but also I say that their commitment, their ownership of these goals for them to attend. Then I see quite some opportunities on tapping better from rural development programs towards forests and foresters' needs. And in terms of forest management and what it entails, in what refers to the intensification of forest management, that is, as said in other parts of this event, where these values of serving the multi-purposes, but also these new elements, now more valued, of climate and biodiversity, need some reflection, and we can debate. I would stop here. Sorry if I took too long.
Thank you, Umberto. Thanks for that. A lot to cover, and I'm sure we'll stimulate some interesting conversations later on. I just want to remind, I think everybody's noticing because I can see the votes on the polls, but the new poll is open. And so we've had over 100 responses so far. There's another poll which is saying, what are the 3 most important actions that we can take in European forests to improve biological diversity? So that's just to remind everybody that that's going on whilst our panelists are speaking. Okay, thank you. So we've heard from the Commission. So Bo, over to you now from Copenhagen.
We have already touched upon the issue about how to protect biodiversity, and basically there are 2 different ways to do it, either by setting aside areas for pure biodiversity protection and or trying to integrate biodiversity concerns into our forest management. And with the next slide here, I have tried to put that everything into one slide, and you could basically take different strategies if really you are wanting to protect and also produce. You could take a strategy saying that you will basically have a large area to protect natural forest, non-intervention forest, old land use forms on one hand, and then use the rest of your area for ligniculture or forest plantations. That is, I think, a strategy which you have to a large extent selected in the US, for instance. But you could also go the other way and trying to have a smaller area of really protected forest, but thereby having a much larger area for what I call nature-friendly forestry. And then leave maybe also a smaller proportion for pure ligniculture. And I think that if you look upon the forest history in Europe, then we have a very long history of integrating things. We have been working with multi-purpose forestry for ever since we started to manipulate the forest 6,000 years ago. So I think that this is basically the way we should go. Then of course the question is, how much area should we set aside for pure biodiversity, and how big proportion of your area would you try to incorporate biodiversity concerns into our management? And I think that just during the last 10 or 20 years, these different ways of trying to develop management practices, which I will call nature-friendly management, has really gained not only in Europe, but also throughout the whole world. In Europe, we call it close to nature forestry or for continuous forest cover. That's a UK term. Retention forestry, it's a US term. Reduced impact logging is used most in the tropics, mimicking natural disturbance regimes, and so on and so forth. So these kind of trying to follow nature, trying to incorporate natural processes in your production system, it has really gained a lot of influence, and everywhere in the world we are struggling trying to develop methods. And so the question is, of course, then where should we place ourselves in order to balance separation ways and then integration ways, and how much pure forest plantations do we want to have? And if I should try to conclude, then my conclusion is that both separation and integration strategies are needed to tackle the biodiversity challenge, and also that they are interdependent. That means the less forest set aside for biodiversity only, the more focus must be paid on nature-friendly forest management. And then last, the balance between integration and separation, as well as the methods used for nature-friendly management, they are differing, and they must be taken according to site, forest and landscape history, ownership, and society. Joe, did I finish in time?
Spot on, Bo. That was brilliant. Thank you. And I loved your middle slide. I might ask you if I can borrow that. That's really helpful with the sliding bar.
It's all yours.
Really helpful for the conversation. Thank you very much. And clearly building on the conversation this morning as well. That was excellent. Okay, thank you. So Luke, I can see you're switched on and ready to go. So over to you now for your thoughts.
Okay, this is good as a starter, I think. But the first was, of course, a reminder from the EEA, and I haven't heard it that literally said, but if you look at the status of forests in Europe, it's actually really not good. We're at 22% that are in favorable condition. I think it's really important to repeat that it isn't as good as it may look at a first glance. If you look into it deeper, if you look at species distribution and other things that ICN also helps measure, it's not good. So please, let's remind ourselves that it's not good, which is also making these forests not resilient towards the future and all the challenges that are coming to forest. The second thing, of course, is there's a lot to do with managing, and there's a lot of elements that are counting, but we have to start with protecting what is most precious and which is very rare old growth forest that we have left. estimations are very different. And this is why I skipped the first slide, because there's one estimation speaking from 1.5 to 4% of the total forest area. The one that is actually much more accurate and proven is the one that is even speaking of less than 1%. Anyway, there's clearly there's discussion on the definition. That said, not a single definition will be perfect. And on top of everything, we know that 50% of what we now estimate as being old growth is not even in a protected area. So just to start with the challenge, and now I want to come to, of course, to the opportunities and that we have with the biodiversity strategy. I think one of the biggest opportunities is the target on 10% of strict protection, which should entail these old growth forests, obviously. The baseline in Europe is 3% of strict protection. We hope that the ICN categories, the 1 and 2, will be of good inspiration not to reinvent the wheel. And so I think that's the first start. There's a great opportunity to better protect these old growth forests. Obviously, these are delivering a lot of ecosystem services, and owners need to be properly rewarded for those and for keeping those going also in these forests where you have no or hardly an intervention needed. So that is just the separating, or the, as I said before. But then I wanted to go to the next slide, is more emphasizing the needs for this forest management and what we think should happen also in the context of strengthening this connectivity. That was mentioned, I think, by Lower Saxony colleague very clearly, that you have these reserves and then they were connected with managed forests. I think that's a very, very good approach. And we need more of that all over Europe, I think, and there's commonalities regardless of which geographic zone you're in. What is important, of course, is to do all of this on a very solid evidence base. Not saying that we need to know everything before we act, but we still need to know more. What we also need, and I think it was alluded to by Umberto already, is that we need to really account for these services in a consistent and in a way that creates a level playing field in Europe, which means the natural capital accounting really needs to be looked at from a European perspective. And we need to go into more depth when it comes to supporting the forest owners with providing these forest ecosystem services. I think it's an absolute necessity to have these social and economic considerations to be taken into account and to make sure that all these services are rewarded properly. This is not happening. And we hope to have a close collaboration with forest owners, and hence we're so happy to be on this panel with CEPF and EUSTAFOR to have some really good discussions, as we've had with the agricultural sector, in what is the way forward and how is it good for foresters, for the audience, so civil society, and for nature and biodiversity as at large. And I'll end with a plea for restoration. So I wanted to emphasize the need for really true ecological integrity. You can go to the next slide, please. Ecological integrity when you look at your forest management, and I think there's still a lot of lessons to learn. But what we really have in front of us is a huge opportunity for restoration. The EU Biodiversity mentions this, the Green Deal mentioned this. In fact, restoration should happen according to nature-based solutions principles. ICN has just launched a standard that we hope that will be followed, not to have everything improvised and just to know clearly what it actually is, a nature-based solution. And then finally, something that has always been puzzling me in the discussions about restoration is the famous bond challenge with the German government. And I know that we have our German colleagues speaking after this panel or at the end of the panel. There is a plea and pledges. There's 200 million hectares globally already pledged to restore in a landscape fashion. Strangely enough,
come along, Luke, please. We're running out of money, running out of time.
Well, I guess you're running out of money. Yeah, that I think is a very true comment. So finally, there is no single EU country at the moment that is contributed to the bond challenge from its domestic perspective, obviously. And Joe, I want to end with saying, and I was surprised not to hear you mention it, that Scotland did have a plea, or does have a plea, on forest landscape restoration. It's the only region in the whole of Europe, and I can't say EU even anymore now, unfortunately, that has pledged. So a warm call to all to take that into account in the near future. You don't have to wait for the legal restoration targets. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I was concerned that you didn't recognise that we pledged in Scotland, because that's quite a big deal. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Luke. Right, Frank, we're going to move on to you now because I've already lost 5 minutes. So if you could switch your camera on and share your screen.
Okay, so hello everybody, and thanks for letting me speak today. I will focus a little bit more on the operational level because I think many things have already been said before, and I would in general support especially also what Luc said just before me, and therefore I would like to give a bit of focus on the more operational level, because I'm currently working on a book project that deals with the integration of biodiversity conservation into managed forest areas. So what are the challenges on the operational level? So I think managing ecosystem services in this changing environment needs to consider the trade-offs and also the potential conflicts. And this is something very important to be done on the operational level. Also, I think it's very clear that we get kind of new forests. We will not get the same species, the same forest environment on many areas after these disturbing events. And therefore it is certainly important to think well about the substituting species and to be aware that we get something different. And the operational level has certainly to guarantee relevant ecosystem services, and it is not limited to biodiversity conservation, although this is one of the most important ones, but we also talk about recreation and water provision, and especially the Alps, which is a big topic, of course, in Switzerland, is the protection function, which often has a priority, which often must be seen as a priority function to guarantee the infrastructure and everything. And then I think I said this before, it is important to decide if we manage in terms of introducing species, if in terms of introducing non-native tree species, and then we come up to the level of usage. So I think we all agree that we still want to use forest products and also timber. And then it comes to the decision, how do we satisfy the markets and how do we satisfy these needs? And last but not least, of course, respect the diversity and avoid uniformity in general. I think this is a very important term, as we know from several scientific studies, that it is really important to allow diversity, not only in terms of biodiversity, but also in terms of management diversity. I think we have heard this before already, but it needs some conditions to allow for that. And then I would like to get to the next slide, and it is a little bit unusual maybe, it's an animation. And it is derived from our Integrate project that we conducted a few years before within EFI, and it shows how I would see this integration of segregative elements. And you can put this on a landscape level and more on a political base, but also you can put this on the enterprise level. And I think this is important that we find enterprises that act as good practice examples in doing this integrative approach and integrate different biodiversity measures, but also different ecosystem services into their daily forest management business. So I think I saved some time.
Thank you.
So this is it from my side.
That's great. Thanks very much, Frank. We have made up a little bit of time. So thank you everyone for your presentations and for largely staying to time. What we're going to do now is, before we get into the panel discussion, we're going to hear from Matthias Schwerer, the Chair of Working Party on Forestry, German Presidency of the Council of the EU, to share a Member States' perspective.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
That's great. So thank you for introducing myself. I'm grateful to the organizers for inviting me to present a quick look at the current policy debate amongst member states in the Council on the issue in front of us, especially as they relate to forests and not to biodiversity in general or biodiversity outside forests. As has been rightly mentioned by several other colleagues today, an increased focus today lies, of course, on both climate change issues related to forests, and secondly, of course, on maintaining and enhancing biological diversity. That's clear. From a forest policy perspective, member states are facing at least 3 more main issues, which also have been mentioned by several speakers earlier in this meeting. The first one is fragmentation of forest-related policies out there, including at EU level. The second issue is how to balance the multiple demands on forests, which cannot be met at the same time on the same forest area. This is, I think, true for all member states facing this increased interest in forests. And the third issue is, and has been mentioned as well, how to support those who own and live with forests and prevent abandonment of rural areas. So these are 3 other main issues which are very important for member states. Now, what's happening under the German presidency? Well, first of all, I have to say that the Council of the European Union has very clearly addressed the crisis situation which we are facing and the anticipated end of the current forest strategy already last year in 2019. Anticipating the running out of the current EU forest strategy and also taking the results of the evaluation of the current forest strategy into account, the Council at that time requested the Commission to present proposals for a strengthened and balanced forest strategy post-2020. Unfortunately, and as everyone knows, this has not been done. Instead, the Commission has presented a biodiversity strategy with proposed elements related to forests without reacting to the said request of the Council. While member states are, of course, supportive to the European Green Deal, which spans over very important issues for our future, and in general also on proposal on a post-2020 biodiversity strategy, and the reasons for it have been presented rightly before. Also a number of concerns have been raised on the potential impacts of some of the proposals. And this also includes leakage effects, which have been mentioned by some of you, which means translocating the use of natural resources to other regions in this world and thus increasing the ecological footprint of the European Union outside of the European Union. Member states are also unsatisfied with the approval of the Commission, with the approach of the Commission to delay proposals on a forest strategy to 2021, thus making coherence building between the various strategies very difficult, understandably. They are missing the aspect of multifunctionality in the proposals of the biodiversity strategy. Member states are also not amused by statements of individual members of the Commission on competence for forest policy, which are unacceptable for most of them, or at least misleading, let's say so. The treaty of the European Union is quite clear on that. And given the diversity of European forests, it is quite clear for member states that there is not one solution or one size fits all solution. And this also applies to biological diversity related action. So what are we planning under the German presidency? At a very early stage already, we signaled to member states and to the Commission that we envisage Council conclusions again on a post-2020 forest strategy in the second half of 2020, which falls under German presidency, which is now. Supported by the trio presidency, which comprises also Slovenia and Portugal, and supported by a great number of former and upcoming presidencies, we finally started the process even without clear proposals of the Commission at hand. Because member states in the Council wish to provide guidance and orientation to the Commission, having already received the European Green Deal and the Biodiversity Strategy proposals. At the same time, of course, the German presidency being responsible for also coherence between policies of various council formations, we are supporting coherence building as much as we can between the two strategies on forests on the one side and biological diversity on the other side, both through language and of course through content of council conclusions on both of them. What does this mean in more concrete terms? Based on proposals by the presidency, member states will most likely stress, first of all, three things in the envisaged council conclusions. One is the importance of multifunctionality of European forests, as has been mentioned many times today. Currently also important for implementing the internationally agreed Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals, who also span over the whole area of sustainable development needs. Second, the internationally accepted principles of sustainable forest management, which the EU subscribed to. And thirdly, we will be stressing the continued need for balancing the multiple demands on forests and for overcoming fragmentation. On the Council's wish to strengthen the post-2020 forest policy of the European Union, there are two pathways being discussed at the moment. First of all, options how to increase transparency and cross-information on forest-related facts and data, but also on activities going on at national level in response to challenges at EU level. Secondly, options how to enhance exchange and cross-border knowledge transfer throughout the European Union and with the Commission on issues of EU-wide relevance, as for example already realized in the European Network Integrate, which has just been mentioned by our colleague Frank Krumm, on nature protection in forestry, who has been active on these issues already for the last 4 years and which will present first outcomes and recommendations during our presidential term. Lastly, and here I come to the end, in order to enhance relevance and impact of the future forest strategy of the European Union, focus areas are being discussed to deal with the EU at EU level. And these are, for example, and certainly not as a surprise, of course, biological diversity. So here we are in the field of coherence building with the Biological Diversity Strategy. We have the intention to bring this forward in close cooperation between the two strategies. The second aspect or focus area will be, of course, related to climate change and focus on adaptation and resilience questions, which have been touched upon by colleagues earlier. And they may also allow for, and will certainly allow also for questions on the future timber supply and so on, because we will have to build on current trends in loss and natural conversion of forests just by climate change related disturbances. And the third focus area will remain and will be the bioeconomy, with forest resources as one of the major bases for that one in Europe, which we cannot overlook. And talking about leakage, forest member states would not wish to refrain from using forests and other natural resources within Europe, while at the same time increasing our footprint outside Europe. Well, this was in a nutshell what is happening currently in the Council in various formations on the two sides, forest strategy development and for biological diversity strategy development related to forests. And of course, this is work in progress. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwerer. That was very, very clear and a lot of content in there. And as we've been hearing, this tension between single purpose, multi-purpose, and from my personal view, music to my ears about getting this coherence, because as I said at the start, it's felt to me all my career, forestry's been in this vacuum between agriculture, biodiversity policy and trade policy, and it's just the bit that's left in the middle is the bit where Europe gets to talk about forests. So this forestry strategy is really vital and long overdue, so please don't delay it anymore. Even though we're not in the EU anymore, but that's not of our choosing in Scotland. Okay, right, I shall go back to moderating. So thanks everybody. What I'm just going to do first is we have the result of the poll, which I think Ellen is showing on the screen now. So I will just take a look at it along with everybody else. We have one absolutely runaway winner. So we said, what are the 3 most important actions that we can take in European forests to improve biological diversity? 114 out of the 139 responses said use sustainable forest management to improve forest resilience to natural threats, which is active intervention. I think that's a very interesting answer, particularly given all the conversation about strict protection and what have you. 82%. I know this isn't the Eurovision Song Contest, but I think that's kind of head and shoulders above everything else. So that's an interesting result there. Next down the line, we have a few that are over 30%. So increasing research, providing better tools for supporting biodiversity at the regional level, and developing new markets for environmental goods and services to encourage private investment. Again, that is something that we've heard a lot of already today. So a good spread of responses, but a lot of votes for sustainable forest management there. So that's maybe backing up what a number of speakers have been saying today, and gives our panel plenty to discuss. So moving on to the discussion, and just a reminder to audiences, if you do have questions, I can see you're all firing questions in, but just a reminder, keep putting the questions in, and my backroom team will be trying to collate them and give me some questions to put to the panel. So the first question that I'm putting to the whole panel, sorry, just let me get my paper. It's just a very straightforward question to start off with, which is, if you could suggest one thing we should do more of, one thing we should do less of, and one thing that would increase the biodiversity value, and one new thing that would increase the biodiversity value of Europe's forests in the next 10 years, what would it be? So one thing we should do more of, one thing we should do less of, and one new thing. And if you want to put your hand up, if you want to go first. If not, I'm going to come to you as I wish. Okay, well done, Frank. You cracked first, so we'll go to Frank first.
I cracked the ice. So what I would do less of, I think, what I would do more, what we should do more of. I think we should invest more and promote technologies that allow the usage of broadleaf construction timber.
Okay.
What we should do less, we should not focus more on monocultural stands, at least not at big scale monoculture stands. And what I would see as a new thing, more or less, is that we should integrate disturbances into forest planning, as it turns out to be, quite a valuable thing, at least for many well, threatened species nowadays.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Bo, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I think I agree with the others that diversity, I think to increase diversity on all levels, it is really important on the genetic level, on the structural level, and on the landscape level. I think that is really needed. And that means also what we should do less of, it is large areas with monocultures. They have also shown not only to be biodiversity adverse, but also giving a lot of stability problems. And then the new thing I would suggest, and it is related a bit to the first issue, is to look more into forest management on the landscape level, to try to incorporate landscape in the forest. We have, as foresters, we have been obliged to plant trees everywhere and to grow trees. That is the old paradigm because that was needed. But we have to think much more about forest as a landscape, to integrate also other landscape elements, open areas, water bodies, restoring water bodies, maybe also increasing the area of part of untouched forest and other structures within the forest. I think that would be very important for biodiversity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Who next? Luke?
Yeah, so we need more restoration, forest landscape restoration, and we need less old growth and primary forests outside of protected areas.
Okay, and what new? What are we going to do new, Luke?
Well, the new thing should be what we said earlier. We need to really have a good system of proper validation of forest ecosystem services and make sure the owners are properly rewarded. And that is still to be renewed because we don't really have a good system at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Umberto?
Well, I would say that we should do more protection and restoration of high diversity and carbon value forests. Something we should do less, I agree. We should do less monoculture, have more diversity. And one new thing would be to go further in what is now called integration and integrate within integration what it's called separation, meaning that protection is a special case of management, including strict protection. I can elaborate more on that. And I hope we have a chance to react to some of the things we've listened before.
Okay, thank you. And Matthias, would you like to suggest something? Oh, you need to unmute yourself, sorry.
Sorry, here I am back. Well, with my role as a policy advisor, what I would recommend to do more is to work on the basis of verified facts, on evidence, on crafts, as you said it rightly, on experience, but also on science, of course, science-based, before taking decisions. And what we should do less is to simply focus on setting aside and throwing foresters and forest practitioners out, and instead look for more effective and more efficient and more intelligent solutions to come to the outcome which we wish to have, instead of easy to read solutions. That would be my two closely related proposals.
Thank you very much. So, so quite a range there. I think I would hope that in Europe, the argument about and the discussion about monocultures, we have moved on from there because SFM does not encourage monocultures. But I think there is a question of scale in there that we're all grappling with in our individual countries in terms of at what scale is a monoculture. Are 3 trees a monoculture? Is 3 hectares a monoculture? Or is 300 hectares a monoculture? What scale does it operate at? But there does seem to be sort of general, I think I haven't heard anybody suggest that reducing diversity would be a good thing. So there is great agreement that we have across the piece there. I think some discussion and new about technology and the use of technology from Frank was suggesting that, and the integrating disturbance into forest planning. As a forest planner, I think that's fascinating how we do that. I think that would be really interesting. I am sensed that there is obviously a tension here between this question of strict protection and what one people see as like protecting and wrapping in cotton wool, other people see as throwing out the forest practitioners, and that this being a sort of fossilization. So that there is clearly further debate to go, which is why we have these sorts of conferences. Tricky one to answer. Okay, so thank you for that, and we're going to move now to some specific questions to individuals. Now I'm going to go, sadly, Luke, I hear you're about to leave us and you can't stay with us for much of the conversation. So I will put a question to you specifically first. I'd like you to answer it quite quickly, so that if any of the other panel members want to come back on a point, any points you make, that we have time before you have to leave us. So the question for you is, are there lessons on improving biological diversity and other natural resource sectors that can be applied to SFM or vice versa? So what can sustainable forest management learn from other natural resource sectors? And also, what can sustainable forest management teach others? But maybe focus on the first part.
Well, let me start by saying that the actions on, and to interpret also sustainable, because sustainable has also very vast interpretation. We do this in the natural context. People talk about natural climate solutions. People talk about agroecology. There's so many names for things that are trying to do things better with nature. And by the way, forests thrive with nature and agriculture thrives with nature. So the first, most logical link is into the agriculture context. And I think the dialogue is one of the most important. So that is something I would really like to emphasize, and not, I mean, understanding the concerns, looking at the social and economic context, and making sure that we don't do harm in that context, and then see and understand that the resilience of the forest will be for the benefit of the forester as well. And then finally, we are trying to put this all together in this, as I already said, this nature-based solutions approach, to make sure it happens in the right way. It is socially valid, it is economically valid, but ultimately it does increase the biodiversity. That's what a nature-based solution should be doing. And with that comes diversity and resilience. And getting at least the guidelines followed that are now being distributed all over the world, and many are already using them. I do hope that we in the EU will also embrace these this nature-based solution standard, so at least we know what we're talking about when we look at what we need to do to get things in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Does anybody on the rest of the panel want to come in on any of those points? Nope, it doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you very much, Luke. In which case I'll go on to Umberto, to you. So one of the things that, was it you that said, or it was Luke, somebody said about paying for ecosystem services. So how does a natural capital approach provide policymakers and forest managers with tools to optimize our management of Europe's forests?
Well, it helps a lot on that, on certain kinds of the multiple benefits that we get from forests, and that are usually not evaluated, not quantified, and often taken for granted. The ecosystems that go beyond wood provision, which is a very fundamental service, are very valuable indeed. If we think of the aspects of water, soil, air, nature, climate regulation, carbon sequestration and storage, all those are elements of natural capital that often go unnoticed, some of which can be converted in monetary terms, others not. So a special approach of natural capital policies, natural capital accounting, is actually to help capture also the economic value. But overall, even when non-monetizable, let's call it that way, the natural capital approach helps taking into account fully ecosystem services in decision making, and thus they help take into account real and full multifunctionality, which is the goal of the biodiversity strategy and of the forest strategy that will build on it.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to add to that? No? Okay. Yeah, I think there's ways to run with the natural capital approach. Definitely, we're starting to apply it on the National Forest Estate, EUSTAFOR member in Scotland and in England. The two forestry agencies there are developing natural capital accounts and using that to drive their management, which I think is it's really interesting. We don't know where it's going to go, but it's definitely sparking different ways of having conversations. Okay, I've just been flagged by the team. Just wanted to mention we've had an MEP who's been, I'm not sure if it's tweeting or who has WhatsApped me, just to say that, I'll just read it out. The German presidency's 3 priority goals on forests, and this is from MEP Savama, who says the German presidency's 3 priority goals on forests are right on the money, with apologies for the American English, but it's the right expression. Easy to agree those 3 priorities for final conclusion. So I think that was aimed at you, Matthias, but so that's from MEP Farmer. Okay, so from natural capital, we will get on to scientific knowledge. So Bo, this is one for you. So what scientific knowledge do we have now that you think we could apply in practice to get a big improvement in the next 10 years?
Yes, I think what is really evident is that we have to develop forests which are prevailing in time, which can survive in time. And then the notion which has been developed over the last 30 years called resilience is extremely important. We have passed the idea of having stable forests. We know that forests are influenced by different kind of disturbances, and they will react upon them, but the ability to come back to prevail in time is important. And then if we should try to look into how to improve resilience, I think it is also from a scientific point of view, it is a question of diversity. It is a question of diversity to have a lot of different tools to work with. And the tools in nature is genes. So it is a question of having diversity on the genetic level, on the structural level, on the landscape level. That means going from monoculture to mixed forest, going from large scale operation to smaller scale operations, going from allowing natural processes to develop, including also to assist migration. And then also, I think migration in terms of other species, also exotic species, since our systems are really going to move out of their natural way of organizing themselves. So that is, I think, what's important, resilience and how to improve variation, diversity, and that counts basically also comes into the issue of biological diversity. To create stable forest, prevailing forest, we have to improve diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. And of those 3, if you could pick, you talked about a whole range of different diversities there. In terms of what's the kind of the one we're the furthest behind on, but that we could make the most progress on in the next 10 years, where should we be focused? Is it genetics? Is it social? Is it landscape level? Which would you focus on?
The problem is that everything in forestry takes time. So you have to start somewhere, and I think you should start everywhere. You should start on working with a mixed forest instead of monocultures. You should start to work with a broader genetic basis of what you are, of the different species. You should also start to manage in smaller scales, not in small scale, but in smaller scale as usual. And then slowly the forest will develop into much more structural rich in terms of species, in terms of sizes, and thereby also a higher robustness towards all kind of influences from outside. It's a long perspective. Sorry to say that.
No, look, we're in forestry. We know it's a long perspective. Okay, thanks very much. Did anybody else on the panel want to come back on anything that Bo's just said? Nope. Okay, right. So next question is to you, Frank. So forest ecosystems they are changing. They're dynamic per se, but the rate and the pace of these changes is increasing as we've been hearing. So forests have always changed, but they seem to be changing more rapidly now due to natural and human activity. So we've said we want more diverse and resilient forests. What do you think, what practices should we introduce to get us to this greater diversity and greater resilience?
Yeah, I think we have to allow diversity, and this means that there must be a certain competence on the enterprise level. And coming back to the point you asked Bo before, for instance, when we have disturbed areas, as we have many now in Germany, in Switzerland, but also in other European countries, we can probably have the courage also to leave some of the areas on its own, at least for a while, leave the deadwood there where it is, because we don't have anyway the capacities to deal with the mass we have now. The markets are down, so lots of the timber is not to sell anymore. And I think we can, we can decide on the spot if we can leave an area, or if we take the timber out, or if we even destroy the timber and let it back into the forest as a kind of a wooden product, a fertilizer. So this is happening at some point, because there is just not enough knowledge at some levels what to do. And I think this is something we should allow for. And then we should also be aware that there is also other ecosystem services that play an important role, and we have to also find intelligent ways. I think Matthias Schröer said this before, to manage these forests and to include the, let's say, protection of species, the protection of at least smaller areas into the management. And saying this, I think we should prepare ourselves to be more resilient on the enterprise level against anything what will happen in the future.
Thanks. And I think this is this thing of things are happening so fast. I liked your phrase, have the courage to leave things alone. Do we also need the courage to research them? Because it seems to me that these things are now happening in real time. If we don't learn from what we're doing, how will we know how to act in the future? So there seems to me there's something in here about, particularly with all of the beetle damage in Europe, okay, if we do leave it, we need to understand better what's happening, because we haven't been here before.
Yeah, I totally agree that there is a strong need to research that, although I have to say there is research that is already available, especially on this issue of saproxylic species, of xylobionts related to deadwood. We know that these species that are threatened, due to management, that they profit of disturbances, but at the same time, we shouldn't leave it alone in general. So I agree with the point that we should not focus only on the protection of areas, but we should improve on the managed areas, and we should really take a good example on good examples to see how they do and what they do, and to promote them, because we also want and should use this, because it is not the alternative to produce more concrete houses. That's not better. And I would really also complement here with the education that we have to invest in the education of people in the future, because I think this is very, very important that we invest into schools, into universities, and educate our students, our foresters of the future.
Yes, I think two things. They're educating the general population, but definitely we're seeing in the UK, and it's a big priority for our sector here, is bringing in the foresters of the future, because boy, we're going to need them. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Is it Matthias or Matthias? Okay. You're muted.
I will react to both. There's no problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry.
It's Matthias.
Matthias, okay. So finally to you. So, and this feels like a good question to round the day off, really, around this particular section, not the day. The publication of the EU Biodiversity Strategy has received different reactions, including from yourself, from warm reaction to strong concerns. So how can, from the member states' perspective, the differing expectations and challenges related to forests and biodiversity be reconciled at the EU level? Easy question.
Okay, thanks. Of course, what I was describing earlier was not the position of Germany or myself. I was trying to feed back or report about discussions of member states in the Council. So it is more or less a collective view building up at the moment, not at the end. We are starting the process. I think before starting amending what I said earlier, I think it would also be valuable to remind colleagues who are new in the process and who start only dealing with forestry at the moment that we also have an historic context, as you yourself mentioned in the very beginning. And one should be a bit more relaxed maybe and see that also in former times, in historic times, there were broad and sometimes heated up debates on how to manage forests. And they were mostly triggered by similar crisis situations, not climate change and biodiversity at those times, but other crisis situations. This is, by the way, why Karl von Karlowitz and many others developed forestry as a business model at that time, long ago, which is caring for future generations with the aim of leaving forest ecosystems behind for their use based on their future needs. I think one needs to capture that, to understand that, where we come from. Having said this, I would not repeat what I said earlier during my presentation on what we are doing to reconcile the various views. Of course, we try our best as German presidency, jointly with our colleagues from the environment side, to build up coherence between the two strategies, biodiversity with forest-related aspects here, and forest strategy with strengthened biodiversity element there, and respective council conclusions on that, which we are developing in parallel at the moment. What I could add at this moment is two things. We are also we will be organizing a conference on the Integrate network, or the outcome of the network of Integrate, which has been mentioned several times now, and which is at the heart of what we are discussing here. It has been our goal to present this as work in progress. As I said, the Integrate Network has been working under the current forest strategy for the past 4 years already in cross-border manner, science-based, with practitioners. So all what has been mentioned here is being done already, and what we want to do together jointly with our Swiss colleagues, one country outside the European Union but still member of the network, is to organize a conference 4 years later with all the outcomes produced during these 4 years, and including scientific work before these 4 years, and bringing this to recommendations and conclusions which can be taken up by policy right now. And this is the time where we need concrete recommendations right now, but build on such experience. We don't need to invent the wheel again and again. So this conference will be on 10th of November, and we hope that many of you can and will participate. Of course, it can only be most likely in a virtual or in a mixed format. We are still under discussion, of course, with our Swiss friends due to the circumstances, but we try our best to make it really policy relevant. And Frank Krums mentioned already the book he's working on. This will be one of the core basis documents which we'll be able to look at, because it will contain experiences of 4 years of Integrate. The second thing which we try to do is to solve an ongoing scientific dispute which was triggered by the publication of GRC and the EEA in the magazine of Nature, the Nature magazine, which has been also mentioned several times today. This has triggered a lot of contrary views of other scientists. There are dozens of lead scientists all over Europe which question this publication, the results of that, and also the methods used. And we, since we are not scientists, we can, as a policy advisor, we can only say, as long as these things happen out there, we don't have sufficient plausible basis for policy decisions, so we need to work on that. And what we are desperately waiting for is exact counter reactions of those scientists, and we are keen to see this happening. We are in contact with the European Forest Institute here, who mentioned this kind of criticism out there, and we are actually expecting some reactions of other scientists in Europe on that. And then we cannot simply leave it. We simply also need to feed this into the discussions and make and come to conclusions on that before we take decisions. These are two more important activities which will be organized under German presidency to help reconciliation between the different views on what needs to be done to enhance biological diversity in European forests. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the reminder that, you know, forestry has had a rocky ride over the last century, and we've been in periods of tension before, and we have found a way through it. So so I think, you know, I've got every optimism for the future that we will be able to bridge this. So thanks very much, panel, for those for your answers to that. We've got loads and loads of questions that have been coming in from the audience, so we're going to move on to a more general discussion now. Just a word to the audience, which is that we'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but obviously we have to be selective, just as we would if we were all sat in a room and I could only pick people at random out of the audience. Panelists might be able to answer in the Q&A function, but if we don't get to your question, I'm really sorry. That's just what we're trying to do. We have managed to make up a little bit of extra time, so so the panel's going to have to work harder, I'm afraid. So we have about half an hour for this now, I think. So first of all, the first question that I have from the fabulous backroom team that have given me, which is from Louise Guillot from Politico. And it's a question for Umberto, specifically. And Louise says that you said that the 2021 EU Forest Strategy will build on the EU Biodiversity Strategy. But a recent report by the European Parliament, and voted on in the Agri Committee, questions the competence of the Commission to conduct forest policy, and rather calls on the Commission to let member states take care of their own forests. Would welcome your views on that.
Well, thank you very much for the question, because I was eager to refer to exactly that, both the competence issue and the forest strategy issue. I'll do just a little quote on what the new EU forest strategy will entail. It will have its key objectives: effective afforestation and forest preservation and restoration in Europe, to help to increase the absorption of CO2, reduce the incidence and extent of forest fires, and promote bioeconomy in full respect for ecological principles favorable to biodiversity. This is what the EU Green Deal says about the forest strategy. So if anyone here only sees biodiversity, it's forgetting the other elements that are there, including the bioeconomy. So I think there's a bit of prejudice on seeing the forest strategy building on the biodiversity strategy as meaning that only biodiversity will count. No, it will definitely count, as will climate, as will the economy, as will social aspects. That's exactly what's in shine. Now, one cannot expect to find everything about what the forest strategy will have in the biodiversity strategy, precisely because the forest strategy will build on, but complement, expand on what the biodiversity strategy covers. Now, the issue of competence. I've been one of those individuals of the Commission with some statements on competence on forests, but I think I'm well accompanied by Commissioner Sinkevičius, Vice President Timmermans, also the Commission's legal service. And the position is very simple. Yes, forestry is not a word you find in the treaty, for sure, but you do find areas of EU competence, environment, climate, disaster resilience, rural development, that are related to forests and forestry. So when the EU acts, it's shared competence, and this is with full respect of subsidiarity. And I really think this debate does not lead us very far away. So I have all respect from that report at the Agri Committee of the Parliament. We respectfully disagree. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that question? No? Okay. Right, we'll move to the next one. So the next question is from Toby Ackroyd, who is part of Wild Europe. So would the panel agree we need more strictly protected forest, at least 15% of the existing area, as well as close to nature forestry on the great majority of the remaining? I'm sorry, this question is very much all over the place. So let's answer that first question first. So do the panel agree we need more strictly protected forest, at least 15% of the existing area, as well as close to nature on the great majority of remaining? Bo?
Yes, I think that I tried to explain that, and with the answer, that depends. I think there was a message from Croatia saying we are managing our whole forest with close to nature principles, very, very close to nature for a very long time. And I would assume that they could, of course, get out with less areas set aside for pure biodiversity. And in other places, in other countries or other regions where basically the whole forest has been completely denuded and then they're starting to build up again, then of course it's important to have these few areas which really are still having biological values to put them aside. So, so it depends upon history, landscape history, about the area of the forest and so on and so forth. That is, I think, the answer. I think also every country should be able to see itself in these kind of strategies. Otherwise, it's no use. Also, the issue about close to nature management, it's completely different in northern Sweden than it is in central Germany, than it is in Portugal. Mm-hmm. You cannot just take the Central European close to nature management approach and put it to Umeå in Sweden or put it down to Faro in Portugal. They have to develop their own principles based upon the actual biome and its history. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bo. Umberto, I think you got your hand up first, and then I'll come back to you, Matthias.
Yes, because the issue of strict protection is coming very often. So I'd like to clarify what the biodiversity strategy does say on strict protection. What it states is, first, it has an ambition chapter on nature protection, aiming at 30% of EU land and sea protected, of which 1/3, so these 10%, should be strictly protected. But here we are not speaking of 10% of all forests or 10% everywhere, much less 10% of farmland or 10% of towns. We are speaking of those high value nature and carbon-rich nature that do require a strict protection approach to keep the values they have. What biodiversity strategy does propose is that the remaining primary and old-growth forests of Europe should be strictly protected. And this is important in itself, but also internationally, because usually we all cherish strict protection of tropical forests such as the Amazon or the Congo Basin. What would be EU's coherence if we could not strictly protect these our own primary forests that we still have? With this said, on definitions of strict protection, we will come with guidance and definition. But one thing for me is rather clear, and is also based in the biodiversity strategy. What one means by strict protection is when natural processes are left essentially undisturbed. This does not mean a don't go, don't touch. It certainly means a don't extract approach on strict protection. If you allow me just 30 seconds to insist on my thesis, that I'm always struck by the separation between integration and separation, or the non-integration of integration and separation, meaning that I see some voices considering that strict protection would be non-management. I don't agree. I think it's a special form, a sustainable forest management, and of close, very, very close to nature management. Strict protection requires decisions. You need to decide what kind of visitation, where is it? Are there invasive alien species coming in? All this is, in my view, an active management based on protection. So I would call for a holistic approach of all the spectrum we can have on what is forest management. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias.
Yes, just to add on this, I mean, I listened carefully to all the panelists before, and I think it came out clear enough that strict protection is not sufficient and not an intelligent solution alone. It needs to be integrated. It can have a complementary role, but I think it also needs to be added that strict protection of areas of our cultural landscapes do not sufficiently take into consideration all the other stresses on forests from outside the forest sector, which is pollution and fragmentation and visitors and all the societal pressings and stresses on forests. And Frank Krumm made it clear enough that many species, be it plants or animals, need active management. So there are many reasons that strict protection alone is simply not an intelligent solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks for that. So our next question comes from Ivo van Trota, apologies for my pronunciation of names. And this is about how the biodiversity strategy and the forest strategy work together. How can the biodiversity strategy and the EU forestry strategy work together? Can they be integrated together? Is there not a risk here that the tail will wag the dog? I think this is possibly for Umberto and Matthias again, but Bo and Frank, feel free to chip in. Umberto.
I don't see how. That comes a bit from this fear. Now we have a forest strategy referring biodiversity. So this means it's only biodiversity? No, it doesn't mean at all. Of course, what is in the biodiversity strategy related to forests will be uptaken and developed in the forest strategy, but complemented by all the other aspects that are pertinent to forests. And as I said, the economic angle, the circular bioeconomy, social aspects will all be covered within that. So I see no difficulty whatsoever in reaching this balance. There is one challenge that you, Joe, have highlighted. Values change, and at this stage, society does value climate and biodiversity more than some few decades ago. So that certainly will be taken into account in the forest strategy. That's the essence of what the Green Deal entails. But it's a full, non-silo, all-integrative approach that we will be conducting within the Commission between DG Environment, DG Agri, DG Klima, and several other services closely linked to it.
Yeah, well, this is as well a question towards the Commission, of course, because we are waiting for the Commission to propose how to do it. The Council is only requesting to build coherence and is offering all support to coherence building and is insisting on such coherence and not hierarchical, introducing new hierarchies between strategies. This, by the way, also applies for the farm to fork strategy, because the biological diversity strategy, of course, stretches all over the landscape. How can this be done? Well, I expressed some ideas how member states at the moment are discussing strengthening and transparency building, and also strengthening our collective work at the European Union level. And all this, of course, in that case of the focus area biological diversity, needs to be done in close cooperation with our colleagues from the environment side, both at member state level and within the Commission. This is quite clear. By the way, the Advisory Committee, Standing Forestry Committee, has always been a committee providing advice from member states to the Commission on all forest-related issues, and this has always been also touching on biological diversity, nature protection, and other issues, and has been in that cases chaired by the DG Environment of the Commission. So we have instruments available how to deal with this, and how to do it exactly is to be discussed. And of course, we are also waiting for concrete proposals by the Commission on that. But this is for the future.
Thank you. Right, our next question that I'm going to take, which moves us on a little bit, is from Robert Paquet from Rom Silva, but it's also picking up this question of distribution. And that is, according to the Biodiversity Strategy, the strictly protected areas target 10%. What does the panel think? How does the panel think we should go about distributing this? And I'm particularly interested in the two academics here in terms of, and it's all right, you're not going to be held to this, but if we are going to go for 10% strict protection, how should we go about that? Go, Bo.
I believe the question is about the spatial distribution or what. I think that there is a need, or all biologists are claiming that there's a big need for big areas where nature can work on itself on a landscape level. And that will basically account for having fewer and larger areas for setting aside. But that could be combined also with smaller areas within a production forest, where you could have these protective forests too. So I think some kind of a combination of fewer larger areas where biodiversity can operate on a landscape scale, where also the natural disturbances on the landscape scale can be accounted for, and then smaller areas within the production forest. That could be an idea at least.
Okay, thanks, Bo. Frank, have you got any ideas?
Yeah, I think it is a similar answer than I would have given before. When the question was if we should put aside 15%, I think it's not black and white. And also with the big areas, I agree with what Bo said, that it seems important to have at least some bigger areas, and we have to account for the situation we have in Europe, that we don't have these large areas than the US, for instance, has. And I think this is something we should probably not complain about, but also see it as an opportunity. And then again, it is a question what we really want, because it is, I think, from my perception, it is not always clear that people want to have pure nature developments, which I think it's absolutely important to have, but very often it's nature conservation that is also related to historical management forms, and then I think if it comes to oak production or oak management, we have to just to see where this is possible, where this makes sense, where opportunities for markets are. And so I think first we have to see what do we have, and then we can decide what we do. And this must not be that we have a evenly distributed protected area network. It's just more based on what we already have, what is there.
Okay, thanks. And Umberto, I'm going to come to you. I'm just going to tweak the question a little bit, because we've had a question has come in from Reinhard Neft, who we heard from earlier at the start of this, and that is not just the distribution in space, but also the distribution between ownerships. So in the biodiversity strategy, is the target for all types of land use? So are we talking 10% forest and 10% farmlands, towns, and all the rest of it? And also between different ownership types. So we can talk about a map with distribution on it, but are we also thinking about distribution between ownership types or between types of land use?
Thank you. I would like to clarify one thing. We are proposing 30% protected areas on land, on sea. It does not mean that we will bring a new further 30%. For instance, on land, we count today between Natura 2000 plus nationally designated areas, around 26% already. So on land, the effort to cover this 30%, not strict, the protected areas in general, is not huge. It's much bigger on the sea. We are around 11% nowadays. There we need a 19% effort. How this is happening? Well, we have a lot of history indeed, in the sense that we do it on scientific criteria. And there are biogeographical differences among the member states that imply, for instance, that nowadays we have wider areas of Natura 2000 in some regions of Europe rather than others. So the same will amount to strict protection. What the biodiversity strategy says is that there should be 1/3 of the 30% on strict protection, especially targeting where high value biodiversity requires in protection so recommends, and also where carbon rich or climate important services are provided by nature. Where they will be, we will see, but for sure we won't go trying to, on the ownership issue, no, it doesn't apply. It's not an issue of going to farmland and towns and this and that, to everyone having a little bit. It's based on what science does recommend, what scientists are telling us we need for our sake tracts of nature left alone for the sake of biodiversity and the services it provides.
Thank you very much, Umberto. Yeah, I can't see any other hands raising, so I'll, excuse me, I just need to look at my other screen for the next question. So, other than distribution, right, so I'm going to talk about, we're now going to move on to talking about losses in the forest value chain. And this is from Miljenko Zupanic. I'm not sure what his or her affiliation is. So, although the presentations have said the overall state of forest biodiversity in the EU is low, several member states have a very high degree of forest conservation and biodiversity. Under the new biodiversity strategy, these countries will be rewarded, quotations, with additional strict protection instead of using their model of sustainable management, which has historically contributed to the biodiversity conservation. Sorry, this is quite a long question. I hope you're still with me. Compensation for lost profits will cover the claims of forest owners, but the question is, who will compensate for the losses in the entire forest value chain? So I think this is getting at, we can come up with mechanisms, whether we can come up with the money, we can come up with mechanisms to compensate the forest owners who might be sacrificing something, but other people suffer. The forest value chain isn't just the forest owners. So does the panel have any thoughts on how we deal with that, with the other losses in the forest value chain? Umberto again.
Yes, because it seems the question focuses on strict protection. And again, what we are proposing is to strictly protect the primary and old growth forests of Europe, which normally are not under exploitation. So for this case at least, normally that shouldn't be a cause for compensation of private owners. But of course, when cases of further strict protection would restrict income, there are two ways to explore. One was referred already, payment for ecosystem services in the cases where they can be paid and reward captured in economic terms. And then I would say public funds for public goods. So again, this is not new, and also remembering we have already a lot of strict protection in Europe. Part of our national parks of Natura 2000, some reserves, parts within other protected areas are strictly protected. So all these problems pre-exist and are not being brought anew.
Thank you. Matthias.
Yes, thank you. I could also complement here because earlier I said already that strict protection alone is not the most intelligent solution, and also according to our experiences in Germany and within this integrated network, we have demonstrated that there is sufficient leeway to to protect elements of old-growth forests and all the species connected with these elements, while at the same time not giving up on the economic use of the timber resource. So if you follow such intelligent solutions, there is a way to compromise. Of course, if we talk about balancing needs, nobody can demand 100% fulfillment of his or her target. But if we are compromising, we can find really intelligent solutions, and the whole economy and the bioeconomy of the European Union does not need to suffer, and we do not need to export our needs and cause our ecological footprint to get worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo.
I think that it has to be mentioned that we basically also, in relation to increasing the potential of forests to capture carbon, in many countries there are plans of increasing the forest area. So I assume that in the long run we will basically have an increased production of wood in Europe, and that would at least to some degree compensate for other areas taking out or at least reduced in their production potential. This is of course a very long-term perspective, but in Denmark, for instance, we have a plan of doubling the forest area within the next 30-40 years. I think also in Scotland you have the same.
Yep.
So in many countries we really are increasing the forest area, and that means also in the long run we are increasing wood production. And that could at least also lead to an understanding that we could also then maybe afford to take out some of the most valuable, biological valuable forests in order, and then relieve them from the production pressure. Yeah. Okay,
Frank, yes.
And maybe I can shortly complement with examples from Switzerland, where certain enterprises have started with a program. It's called eco-sponsoring, where local industry and local people can just give a bit on the forest they would like to have. This is not a political solution, but it's a bottom-up approach. And I think this is exactly a right direction to kind of include the society that obviously has expectations.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we just sort of bring in from the Scottish perspective on both of those points. Yeah, the forest establishment has really, really massively taken off in the last few years. We're doing 10,000 hectares a year, balanced between native and productive for different purposes. But that's after an awful lot of hard work to do the groundwork, and a big part of that has been getting the engagement of the local communities, like you say, Frank. And so all of these things need to come together. It's not straightforward, and it's easy when biodiverse forests are also the ones that lock up the most carbon. It's much more difficult when you find that the forests that aren't the most biodiverse are the ones that are better for locking up carbon, and we're definitely grappling with that at the moment. Okay, so we're now on to what might well be our final question for all of you. And this is about the quality. So rather than the quantity of protected areas, which is always going to be tricky, it's about the quality. And this question comes from Christian Tonnesson. It says, in the poll, there was no mention of the quality of the strictly protected areas. Sorry. Oh, no, that's okay. Don't worry. Oh, it's telling me where she's from. No. Sorry about that. Right, from Christian Tonnesson. In the poll, there was no mention of the quality of the strictly protected areas. Depending on the national situation, it might be reasonable to work on improving the quality of existing protected areas rather than by simply increasing the area under protection. So here we go into the quality versus quantity discussion, which we haven't really got into yet. So anybody want to pick up on that one? Yeah, I thought you might, Umberto. Can you keep it brief so we can get around the whole table? Thanks.
I can be very brief. We need quantity and quality. Quantity because that's what science says on the minimum levels of protected areas and strict protection. We are beating by science on that. At the same time, an important aspect is for the protected areas we have already, we need better management, we need effective management. And for the new areas, of course, the same. Paper parks will not serve us, be it strictly protected or normally protected.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody else got anything they want to say? Oh, yeah. Okay, so Matthias and then Bo.
Yeah, the same sequence. I could also complement here by saying that, of course, the same discussion on intelligent solutions also affects or should affect protected areas, because just having a protected area does not say anything. We need to have clear objectives for protected areas as well. And all national parks and protected areas normally have such objectives. And then, of course, we also need monitoring and tools to prove that the objectives are met, and that this activity of a protected area is efficient and is sufficient. And then we have to take conclusions. I'm simply talking against strictly protected areas as the only and intelligent solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Bo.
Yes, we have tried in Denmark to go through all our forest with this high nature value forest, and then try to combine them with our obligation in terms of what kind of protection need are there for the red listed organisms. And then you come up with some kind of ranking where quality comes in as a very important part. But I think we have to also mention that size is also a quality in itself.
Yeah.
So it's not so easy.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, Frank, then I'm going to squeeze in one more question. Quick answer from Frank.
I have a very short answer. I think it should be representative. And then maybe the quantity and the quality question goes a bit into the back, because representativity means that it could be much, it could be less, but it should be representative.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the last question of the panel. Well done, guys. This has been quite long for a Zoom panel. So we're going to get on to money. So does the panel think that member states might, and sorry, this is from Evelyn Underwood, who is, sorry, I will just get where she is from, who is from the IEEP. So what Evelyn is asking is, does the panel think member states might be persuaded to allocate more of their CAP funding to forestry, or are they looking for other public support mechanisms? Considering that in the current period, the forestry measures are only being used by around a half of member states, and mostly only for funding forest fire prevention and replanting. So this is about the allocation of CAP funds, taking money from CAP to put it in and using the CAP funds for forestry. Matthias?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, with this, we mention another very important element of policy at the moment, also under German or during German presidency, which is the shaping of a decision on the future CAP. And of course, we are all aware that this also is very important for forestry. Also knowing that the uptake of offered contributions here has been very low, and we will certainly, and this is also discussed amongst member states in the Council, also let's say make up a policy, or let's suggest a policy on how to improve this, because the uptake has several reasons. The uptake has the basic reason that the whole regime is more focused on agriculture and does not offer adequate means and methods for forestry. So we need to think of how to overcome this and to increase the uptake of principally, probably also in the future, available funds. So this is only an element under discussion at the moment, but I wanted to say this is realized as a challenge, while being aware from the part of the member states that the CAP will remain also a very important support system and instrument for forest policy in the future. In addition, of course, to all the various support schemes at national level which are available.
Thank you very much. I saw some other hands going up. Yes, Umberto.
Thank you. Well, I do think that CAP funding for forestry can be better, in the sense that, you know, sometimes it looks like it falls in the cracks between, as someone said, agriculture and the environment. But the prospects for better use of CAP funding for forests increases with increased attention of forests in relation to climate and biodiversity, which are specific objectives of the CAP. So if the Commission's CAP proposal ambition is maintained, and if the role of the Commission on checking the Member States' strategic plans does ensure an alignment with the Green Deal targets, the targets of biodiversity strategy and so forth, we have ample room there for more forestry, from the 10% landscape features in agricultural land, part of which can easily be trees, to the pledge of 3 billion trees to be planted under appropriate reforestation. And there's again a keyword that I think can deliver a lot, which is agroforestry, which properly managed does deliver more forestry, also more agricultural production and more biodiversity altogether. So I think that should be something to explore.
Thank you, Bo. With
yes,
1 minute.
Yes, then I will say I have a dream. And if you try now to combine how the agriculture is going to deal with its partly huge carbon footprint, and then combine it with the potential of a forest to store carbon, then I believe, that's my dream, that these things could be instrumental in order to use the CAP in a more intelligent way.
Thank you. What a lovely way to conclude the panel with Bo's dream. So that's great. So apologies to all of our audience if we didn't get round to your question. As I can see, I think we have at least 20 questions that had come in. Hopefully we got a good go around the subject areas that people were wanting to ask. Could I just take, we can't give everybody a round of applause, but thank you so much to the panel, and for that was quite an intense session. So thank you very much for that and for your engagement. You're going to be released now from being on camera. You'll be pleased to know. So we're all virtually applauding you. So thank you very much for your time and for your engagement. And we're going to now move on to the closing remarks. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So thank you to the audience, and I just want to introduce again Jessica Polfjärd, Member of the European Parliament, to give us some closing remarks, and that'll be followed by Sven Erik Hammar from CEPF. Over to you.
Thank you, and hello everyone, and thank you to all of the speakers and to everyone who have participated today, and a special thanks to you, Joe, who have kept it all together for quite a few hours now. And I know it's been a long day, and I will try to just keep it short. First of all, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to have this seminar, and I think we all agree upon it's a rather important topic. Even though most of the focus today in society has been on the COVID-19 virus, of course, and how we can combat it and how we will open up societies again. The challenge of the climate change has not disappeared, and it's still actual and present. From my point of view, and the reason also why I accepted to host this seminar is that forestry has a big part to play in how we are going to lower our emissions, a discussion that we have every day almost in the Parliament. And for example, through active forest management, we can have growing forests that leads to a great increase in carbon storage, and also by substituting fossil-based products with bio-based that will lead us to greatly diminish our emissions in the future. And some will say that the loss of biodiversity due to this is too high, and that the best way to combat and climate change is to preserve the forests. Even if I can understand what they are after, I truly believe that the best way to ensure that we have healthy and resilient forests is to actively manage them. And today's speakers have also shown that active forest management and maintaining and enhancing our forest biodiversity are not in contradiction to each other. Instead, they can be a complement to each other. And I think that is very important to bear in mind. Because in times when it's of great importance to lower our emissions and reach our climate goals, we cannot afford to not utilize forests and the climate benefits that they entails. For me, as a Swedish MEP, I see forestry as a part of my history and my country's history, and I also see it as a crucial part and an important part of our future. And I truly believe that that goes for the rest of Europe as well. But for that, and I repeat what I said earlier, we have to show that active forest management is not in contradiction to forest biodiversity. And with that, I would like to thank you all again on behalf of Mr. Jarubas and I, and thank you for listening and participating in this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd finally like to hand over, and I've seen him on the camera, to Sven Erik Hammar, who is a member of the board of CEPF, who is going to give the final closing remarks. Sven, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. A big thanks to our host, our speakers, and our guests also. My name is, as you said, Sven Erik Hammar. I'm a board member of CEPF, and I'm also a forest owner in the northern part of Sweden. And on behalf of CEPF and EUSTAFOR, I would like to warmly thank MEP Jarubas and MEP Polfjärd for hosting our joint event. I would also like to very much thank all the distinguished speakers who provided rich and constructive expertise and experience. And I would like to thank the audience for being so numerous today. This event was very timely, a few months after the publication of the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, and a few months ahead of the publication of the EU Forest Strategy post-2020. From forest owners and managers' perspective, this event is of course not the end of the discussion, but should be seen as an additional step. Indeed, European forest owners and managers are the custodians of forests' futures, and are the ones who are ultimately required and responsible for both the long-term development of the forest they own and manage, as well as for implementing EU and national legislation applying to their forests. And in this context, forest owners are key partners to implement current EU policies and to frame future policies. As it was mentioned several times during the discussions today, biodiversity preservation is entirely a part of daily choices and activities of forest owners and managers who are willing and motivated to keep forest heritage productive, healthy, resilient, and biodiverse, thanks to sustainable forest management. So we hope to continue this discussion with all of you in the coming weeks and coming months. So again, from CEPF and EUSTAFOR, Many thanks to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sven Erik. And all that leaves me to do is to say thank you from myself as well, particularly to our wonderful panelists and speakers who have made my job easy, and also to the ladies in the back room who have been supporting me as I've been doing this on multiple media channels. There's quite a team there from CEPF and EUSTAFOR who've been doing a tremendous job just feeding me stuff to keep me going. So thanks very much to those guys. The organisers will send participants a follow-up email with all the materials of the event. The whole thing has been recorded should any of you want to share it. And please follow the EUSTAFOR and CEPF websites and social media channels for more information and updates on this topic. So, so I've just had a text from the team who want to applaud. So, so go ahead. I just want to give the microphone to the people in the background who've been doing all of this. Well done, team.